This guy is named Incris. After causing a lot of trouble, he got demoted to squad leader because of these idiot knights here who started making noise bright and early. It was so loud it was like a madhouse, and Incris was beyond annoyed. More than anyone he knew, he didn't have any special talents or powers. He had to train non-stop. That's the only way he made it this far, through countless battles where he had to risk his own life. But now getting demoted like this, it felt like the end of the road for him. The more he thought about it, the harder it was to breathe. He had no skills and he knew his dream was out of reach, yet he still held on to the hope that even if everyone laughed at him and said his dream would never come true, as long as he kept his sword gripped tightly in his hand, he could definitely become a knight. But that remained a hopeless dream, because in the final battle, Incris had his throat pierced by an enemy blade. The sensation of death came on so fast he couldn't even fight back. He collapsed into a pool of blood. Maybe Incris never even imagined his death would be this pathetic. His consciousness gradually faded away, and he knew the messenger of hell was coming to take him. But somehow, Incris suddenly woke up amidst the familiar noise. "Get up, get up!" The yell made him jump, panicked and wide awake. He reached up to touch his throat, wondering, was that just a dream? Seems like there's something in my boot. Ah, this damn bug! But the cursing coming from the bed next to him left Incris stunned. Wasn't this sequence exactly like the morning before he joined that final battle? Every word was identical. This was just too absurd. But he couldn't explain the cause, so he just brushed it off as a hallucination and stepped onto the battlefield once again. And this time, the result was no different. Incris still had his throat pierced by that blade, meeting the same outcome. But then, this didn't just happen twice. It kept happening 3-4 times over. After every time he was finished off by his opponent, Incris would wake up in his bed to the same racket. The enemy's sword would pierce his throat. The intense pain, the blood gushing out, everything was terrifyingly real, yet each time he woke up with his body completely intact. It was just like it had been a dream. After repeating this so many times, Incris accepted the reality that it wasn't a dream. It was that he was trapped in an endless loop. The day of this battle kept repeating over and over, and then, after being finished off by that sword tip so many times, he had actually gotten a bit smarter. You couldn't deny it. That was a strike with perfect form. This was the 17th time Incris had seen that blade, yet things only progressed, to the point where his eyes could track the path of the sword. But he still couldn't dodge it. Incris had bitten the dust 17 times now. This feeling was truly not pleasant at all. He told himself, if I had just trained a bit harder, if I had just put in a little more effort, would I not be dying in a pool of blood in such a humiliating way? His consciousness faded once again, falling into a desolate space before waking up. But this time was different. Incris woke up before he actually respawned, because he heard a voice. Do you truly think that? Try to struggle, feel it, and then give up. In the despair before the wall, you cannot overcome on the river, there was an entity sitting on a rotting boat, holding a faint, eerie green lamp. It spoke to Incris. Though he couldn't see the creature's face, he could feel the mockery hidden in its words, and it drove Incris mad. Once again, he woke up to the familiar warning noises of the barracks. Incris calmly sat up, seeing that the soldier in the next bed asked, "Squad leader, you're up on time today." "Jem, there's a bug in your boot," Incris wearily warned him. Jem, who was just about to put his boot on, hearing what Incris said, he took it off to check, and sure enough found a bug inside. He quickly shook it onto the floor and stomped it flat. "You put it in there, didn't you?" "What kind of stupid prank is this?" Jem yelled. "Shut up, I just saw it crawl in," Incris replied. Then he grabbed his sword and headed out. He glanced back for a moment. This was the 18th time Incris had seen the corpse of this bug. If he saw it a few more times, could he put an end to this day? Thinking back, Incris had been practicing the sword since he was young. His swordplay was learned from a former mercenary who happened to pass through his village. Back then, the man was quite surprised, because he felt the boy's rapid progress. Incris still remembered him saying, "If you're this good, kid, you could totally become a knight." That very sentence was what made Incris start dreaming of becoming a knight. He imagined himself looking like someone who could take down 100 enemies by himself and change the tide of a battle. An invincible hero, A knight who could end a war. They would call him the apocalyptic knight. Ingrid thought he would become the protagonist in the songs that wandering bards hummed. The more he thought, the more determined he became. And so Ingrid left the village to pursue his dream of becoming a knight. But life is not a dream. Before long at the tavern, the seniors started using him as a punching bag. Hey, see that failure of a rookie? A coward even a stray dog would be scared of, and he wants to be a knight. He probably wouldn't even make it as a mercenary, ha ha ha. Ingrid heard it all, but could only sit silently in a corner bandaging his own wounds. He had left the village and joined a mercenary company, realizing for the first time that his talent wasn't that special. But back then, Ingrid still felt it was too early to give up because effort won't betray anyone. So he threw himself into training. If he lacked talent, then Ingrid believed that with time and effort, he could still overcome everything. His effort truly surpassed anyone else's. And just like that, Ingrid started gaining experience, gaining the strength to. He still felt it was too early to give up after one failure, because hard work never betrays anyone, and so he threw himself into training. If he lacked talent, then Ingrid believed that with time and effort, he could still overcome everything. His dedication was truly beyond anyone else's. Just like that, Ingrid began to gain experience and the strength to. Being acknowledged by those around him, he felt himself growing stronger, and once again he harbored a desperate hope that he could become a knight. That desperate hope began to shatter when a child from his village challenged him to a duel, and humiliations of humiliations Ingrid lost. "You're too weak, uncle," the kid sneered. In those eyes there was nothing but contempt. It must be emphasized that the boy was only 12 years old and had only started learning swordsmanship 6 months prior, while this fool had spent over a decade, just swinging his sword until his hands bled only to fail miserably against this young genius. Ingrid collapsed instantly. He wondered if all his efforts had been in vain. Was there truly no other way? As his hope began to crumble, Ingrid nearly went mad, spending even more time training. He still wanted to become a knight, even though everyone looked down on him. They called it a hopeless dream, yet Ingrid still strove to achieve it, sacrificing sleep and food more than anyone else. His whole life he had swung his sword and swung and swung. Day after day, he practiced harder than anyone else from the dead of night until the sun climbed over the peaks, from when he was full of strength until he couldn't breathe. Ingrid told himself that even if he couldn't become a knight, at the very least, he had to become an experienced soldier. And so 3 years passed. Now in the present, after Ingrid has been reborn for the 18th time within the Capri Division, 4th Platoon of the 4th Company, and under that the 4th Squad, Ingrid has become a squad leader of a second-class squad. It was the best position he had achieved through relentless effort. It wasn't a high rank, but being a regular soldier was still better than wandering around as a mercenary. "Hey Jackson, take the morning shift for me today," Ingrid said to the young soldier in his squad. The kid glanced at him. He stared at him with unreadable intent, and only after a long pause did he reply, "Remember to swap next time." After saying that, Jackson stood up and left. His surly attitude made James very unhappy. He started grumbling. "Oh man, what a wild stray dog! Look at that glare of his!" Ingrid didn't pay much attention to Jackson. Instead, he told James that he wanted to learn the combat technique called Beast Heart once again. At this sudden request, James raised an eyebrow at him and asked, "I thought you gave up on that a long time ago. Do you really think trying again will work?" Ingrid didn't mind his words. The battle between Naulilia and Aspen was about to begin again, and he would die in that fight. Like an unavoidable end, Ingrid had been reborn, and started repeating that day over and over. Although he had learned Beast Heart from James every time he was reborn, Ingrid still couldn't keep up, and the sword had pierced his throat every time. Even so, he never gave up. Every time he woke up, Ingrid thought, "Today I'll definitely succeed." And so he went through that battle. This time is the 20th time. He has completely memorized this recurring situation. He dodged the spear thrust from behind. Ingrid remembered clearly that the next attack would come from the guy behind him, and he dodged that too. A piercing scream rang out right next to him. Ingrid realized it was Ven, another member of the squad, but he would soon lose his life as well. Just as in theory, Ven was about to be hit by an arrow, but as someone who knew it beforehand, Ingrid could not. Just stand by and watch it happen." So that arrow was blocked by his shield. Afterward, Ven was ambushed by an enemy from behind, and this time Ingrid stepped in to neutralize the danger for him. Just like that, Ingrid completed the first goal of the day, protecting Ven's life. But the more important thing was yet to come. He saw the soldier Freddy with the sword that would send him to the afterlife. In previous times, Ingrid always faced the ending of a miserable defeat at the hands of this bastard. He had stabbed him in the throat and finished him off 20 times, and now, this time, he was advancing just like the times before. But Ingrid was determined to survive. Previously, James had told him that he always squeezed his eyes shut whenever he was in a dangerous situation, right after saying that he swung the axe in his hand toward Ingrid, and truly he had squeezed his eyes shut. Look at that, look at that. If you do that on the battlefield, you'll lose your life in an instant. Be braver. Don't let yourself get agitated or stunned so easily. Become someone who doesn't know what death is, like a beast. That is the very thing that he had insisted on learning from James after dying so many times. He was reborn, and this time, as that blade thrust toward him again, Ingrid finally grasped the beast heart. He was like a beast that didn't know what death was. He was no longer afraid of dying. To be more precise, death even made him stronger. His eyes locked firmly onto that sword point. Thanks to that, he avoided it by a hair's breadth. Just one tiny change made the situation different. For the first time, Ingrid had kept his life against this cruel fate. That made him incredibly excited. Ingrid immediately turned to counterattack, but his opponent reacted even faster than him. After missing the stab, he quickly twisted the sword back, and when Ingrid turned back, it once again pierced his throat, just in a different posture. Fresh blood sprayed everywhere again. It was that painful, unpleasant sensation. Once, again, his consciousness left his body. During that seemingly endless long day, Ingrid was trapped and felt incredibly pained and desperate. "Give up and get on the boat," the messenger of hell said to him. "Admit your weakness and find release. Even though you're not gaining ground, you keep stubbornly retorting, 'That day will never come, you bastard.' You've been reborn yet again." This time, Ingrid shows a bit of improvement, catching the opponent's blade with wide-open eyes and dodging it for the first time. You are moving forward step by step, which gives Ingrid no reason to give up, but he didn't expect that this day would drag on for 33 times. Each time you only make slight progress, but now you can easily dodge the first incoming thrust. You even manage to dodge before it can graze your neck, but repeating this over and over still isn't enough. That bastard's speed is just too fast. Every time Ingrid dodges his first strike, he finishes him off with an even deadlier blow. You are truly sick of this endless cycle of dying and reviving. This 33rd time, the enemy's blade doesn't pierce through your neck, but just cuts across, leaving a deep wound, and the necklace Ingrid always wears is severed by the sword. The pendant falls to the ground and shatters much like your life. Back when you were a mercenary, Ingrid, you took on a few monster extermination contracts, not that you were forced to. You just happened to help the villagers you passed by. The reason Ingrid chose to help them was that you harbored an ambition to become a knight, and protecting the weak is a knight's duty. Once after wiping out a pack of wolves lurking around a village, Ingrid was paid by the villagers, but because they were short on everything, they could only give you that pendant. It was supposed to be an amulet, but honestly, it was a joke compared to the price Ingrid paid, risking his life to fight the wolves. Still, the person who gave it to you said that this charm could grant you the wish you desired most. That's why Ingrid always wore it. Only today, when it was accidentally sliced off and fell, did you remember its existence. Ingrid wonders if this is the reason why his day keeps repeating itself, because of his wish to become a knight. You must be in a lot of pain, right? The enemy soldier, seeing that Ingrid isn't quite dead yet, walks over and raises his sword, preparing to deliver a finishing blow. This is my mercy. The words, my mercy, sound so ironic. Ingrid can even see the look of contempt and the satisfied smile on that man's face. He is clearly a sadist who finds pleasure in killing others, yet he dares to call it mercy. In the end, Ingrid is finished off by him just like every other time, but the very look on that bastard's face in those final moments gives you the resolve to overcome this ordeal. The sound of the alarm, the bug in Jem's shoe, everything is exactly the same. Ingress still makes him teach you the beast's heart, and Jem's demeanor is exactly as it was before. Having practiced together so many times now, Ingress has made some progress. To you it's slow, day-by-day improvement, but to Jem it's as if Ingress has become a completely different person after just one night's sleep, so he cannot hide his surprise. You're acting a bit strange today. Where did that fierce courage come from? From my training, but this is too fast even for that. Jem still finds it strange. In reality, the two of you have repeated this conversation over 10 times already. But only Ingress remembers it. The beast's heart is Jem's family secret technique. It's not something you can just learn instantly. So naturally, he feels strange seeing Ingress master it so well. But he is right. The spirit you possess was gained through countless near-death experiences. Only you can't say that out loud. I guess I was just lucky enough to learn it. Ingress brushes it off, and afterwards, you pick up a sword and ask Jem to spar with you again. As for Jem, he feels Ingress seems more eager than usual today, but he happens to like that quite a bit. As for Ingress, you are anxious to train, because even if you learn the beast's heart, it's not enough. If you can dodge but can't counterattack, then it's useless. Therefore, besides mastering Jem's secret technique, you still have to practice swordplay simultaneously. In that situation, Jem is an excellent opponent. His strikes are incredibly powerful while Ingress keeps dodging, but this reaction of yours really doesn't satisfy Jem. How long do you intend to just dodge squad leader? Jem's attacks become increasingly dangerous, and he shows absolutely no sign of stopping. Meanwhile, the only sword style Ingress knows how to use is the mercenary technique, a style that is rather eccentric, created by a mercenary named Valen. Quite a few people despise this sword technique. They call it a dirty, cheap trick, but just now... Hey, Jem's axe blade drew a line on Ingress's face. If you keep doing nothing, you're going to get seriously hurt by Jem. Among the things you have, the Valen sword technique is perhaps the most legitimate skill. And so, Ingress decides to use it to counterattack. You lunge toward Jem and thrust the sword in your hand. The opponent seems momentarily stunned, but then quickly uses his weapon to knock your blade away, even though you are... His squad leader, the gap in skill between the two of you is still too great. Ingress feels his hands trembling. He realizes that just now he had instinctively mimicked the thrusting technique of that sadist. Having lost his life to that bastard dozens of times, Ingress's body was slowly memorizing the moves. Damn it, that was close. I almost bled out there, Jem. Jem spoke up too. Out of everything you've shown me so far, that last thrust was your most solid move yet. It really should have been executed like that from the start. Put a little more power into it, get it? And your hand should have been more decisive. He wasn't great with words, but ultimately Jem felt that Ingress was still hesitating when he struck. This could make your attack pass right through your opponent and get blocked easily. By then, you'll be the one at a disadvantage. How should I put it? You need to strike with the determination of, there is no way you can dodge this. That's how. You should hold your sword and deliver those fatal blows. Even though Jem's explanation was pretty poor, Ingress still understood what he meant. The difference between his thrust and the one from the bastard who had killed him time and again was the sheer decisiveness and power in the blade. Thinking back on those previous times, not once did that guy's blade fall without conviction. And as he had seen every single time, Ingress was taken down by that very sword. If he wanted to win, he had to deliver a firm strike, just as Jem had said, and so he refused to give up. Although every time he went to the battlefield, Ingress was still cut down by that blade. But after coming back to life, he would drag Jem out for insane training sessions. Ingress progressed little by little. Even though the results weren't immediate, he could still recognize his own relentless improvement. Ingress would keep moving forward, even if he only advanced half a step at a time. He lost count of how many times he had heard the line, "This is my mercy again." He only knew that it had been over 4 months, more than 4 months, that Ingress had to live in a single repeating day of constant death. Finally, on the 124th day, his training saw a breakthrough. "You're crazy," Jem asked, startled when he saw Ingress's hand bleeding from holding the sword for too long. "Your hand is dripping blood, man. Why are you laughing like a maniac?" He of course didn't understand why Ingress was laughing, because today, after more than 4 months, he had finally mastered the bastard's thrust with the resolve to finish his opponent off. Increase's first thrust failed. He was countered instantly, but even with the blade piercing his throat, Increase refused to close his eyes and absolutely would not let go of the sword. That was how he grew from the battlefield. Everything that happened from the previous sword fights to that last thrust was a very long journey. Every time his opponent stepped on his chest, raised his sword to finish him off, and said, "This is my mercy," Increase would stare at him with hateful eyes and say, "You will definitely die tomorrow." "Oh, but the dead don't have a tomorrow, do they?" The opponent's smile reeked of sarcasm. Then he viciously plunged his sword down. That was all that occupied his mind. And then, after many failures, Increase finally succeeded in taking that bastard down, but unexpectedly he was quickly finished off by someone else. Even though that wall had been knocked down, he still died and came back to life. How many times had this been now? Increase reminded Jem about the bug in his shoe again. This time, Jem didn't shout, assuming it was a ridiculous joke. Instead, he thanked Increase for the reminder. "If you're feeling grateful, then be my bodyguard," he said nonchalantly. Jem was also surprised by this attitude from Increase. He muttered, "How can he order me around so naturally like that?" After leaving the bedroom, Increase went straight to a young man nicknamed Big Eyes and told him to find him a pair of greaves, a sturdy shield, and a dagger. "Payment later." Big Eyes looked at him skeptically. "Whatever, it's because you're the captain that I'm trusting you, all right. I normally wouldn't help anyone, you know that." Jem, walking right behind him, felt even stranger. In his memory, Increase wasn't the type to boss others around like this, but today, from Jem to Big Eyes, Increase was ordering them around quite smoothly. "That's because you guys are always dumping work on him, you lazy bums." Jackson, sitting to the side, suddenly spoke up. "What did you say? Want to try a taste of my axe?" Though he threatened him like that, Jem wasn't in the mood. Early in the morning, and they were already bickering. All his attention was focused on Increase, who had been behaving very strangely since waking up. Jem didn't remember him ever being this tense before. Increase didn't feel comfortable, and he vented his frustration through training. Every time he lost his life, he felt horrific pain. Of course, Increase didn't want to experience this pain ever again. He wondered what if even after thousands or tens of thousands of times he still couldn't win, or if he found a way to escape. What would happen? Would he be able to wake up tomorrow, or would he still be stuck living this same day? He was stronger now, should he be satisfied with that? A series of questions swirled around Increase, but he had no choice. He was forced to overcome it. That wall seemed insurmountable, so he learned to strike and slash. Increase continued his endless cycle of training. If someone else were in his shoes, they might consider it torture. But Increase saw it as a blessing, and he absolutely could not pass up that blessing. He had to keep moving forward and win just as promised. Big Eyes had found him suitable equipment. The battle began once again, and Increase led his squad into the fray with great momentum. He went from someone with no skills to someone who successfully survived this battle, thanks to 3 things: preparation, luck, and a cool head. On the 46th day during the battle, Increase's left shoulder was crushed by a spiked mace. On the 47th day, you rolled to dodge the mace, but another guy bashed you in the head. That taught you a lesson: spin around and slash him first. On the 71st day, some guy cut off your leg, leaving Increase helpless. But today, thanks to the leg armor you had Big Eyes find for you, he couldn't do a thing. Then, on the 89th day, an axe came flying and took Increase's head off. If he stayed alive, he'd just keep interfering in this fight. So you couldn't let him off. After all those days, you've mastered throwing weapons, dodging that axe, and finishing him off in one motion. Piece of cake. But behind Ingrid, a marksman known as the Falcon's Claw appeared, and you had no time to take him out. But now the time has come to face the wall. It's happening again. The most impenetrable wall appeared that day. Increase stood on the battlefield facing that man. You approached it with a new mindset, as equals. As usual, his sword struck toward you without a hint of mercy. This time, Increase used his shield to block. The force of the strike shattered the shield instantly, but Increase had completely anticipated that. If you only dodged and struck, you wouldn't have a chance at winning. so Incris intentionally sacrificed the shield to create a better opening. His opponent was just a regular soldier, yet incredibly strong, almost superhuman. After your shield shattered, he immediately launched another attack. This time, Incris used his own blade to block. The soldier was stunned. He expected Incris to lunge and counter, not stand his ground. That moment of hesitation was priceless. After 4 months of clashing, Incris realized something. Despite his strength, the guy lacked real combat experience. He was easily caught off guard, even if it was just for a split second. It was the perfect moment to counterattack. The Valen mercenary sword techniques had plenty of variations effective against him, so Incris put them to use. You started taking control, constantly creating situations where your opponent couldn't react in time. But he wasn't the type to give up easily. Like this time when Incris lunged to attack, he reacted lightning fast using his signature thrust to try and push you back. Too bad for him, Incris dodged the thrust. It made him stumble, but he recovered quickly. Incris was all too familiar with what happens after a missed thrust. He'd always follow up with another strike in the blink of an eye. This time was no exception, but you already knew everything there was to know about that move. Incris wouldn't go down easily either. You're a far cry from the person you were 4 months ago. Instead of closing your eyes and waiting for death, you fiercely counterattacked. What Incris was aiming for wasn't the soldier. It was his incoming sword. Your blade successfully struck his, shattering it into pieces. A swordsman without a weapon, what could he possibly do? Incris thought to himself. I've won. However, you didn't expect that the moment you broke his sword, someone else from afar would fire an arrow. It was zooming straight toward your back. Luckily, the arrow couldn't reach Incris because Jem's axe cut it down. Incris didn't even notice the sneak attack. Your sword had finally pierced your enemy of 4 months. I'm going to cut off all the claws of that hawk, Jem shouted. It's too late, don't waste your energy, Jackson calmly advised him. They were arguing loudly, but not a single word reached Incris's ears because you were completely focused on that soldier. Finally, after 124 long, grueling days, Incris took down his opponent. In the blood-red late-afternoon sun, he collapsed before your eyes. Half of his face was revealed from behind the helmet, his expression complex. He was down to his last breath, and this time Incris held the power of life and death. You raised your sword, but instead of offering mercy like he did, Incris just whispered, "Rest in peace." The sound of metal hitting flesh rang out, and his head was severed. It was a massive achievement for Incris, for today you had officially broken through the wall, that wall that seemed untouchable. But before you could even enjoy the victory, Incris was kicked by someone. You were sent flying, unable to hold back a roar of pain. Seeing this from afar, Ren tensed up. He lunged forward, shouting, "That guy is a toad." The reason Incris got hit so hard by this person is because of the wall that you just tore down. I put so much effort into raising him. To think he'd lose to someone like you. The Toad Man said this while looking at the one Incris had just defeated. Since his head had been severed, his neck was still gushing blood. It was a horrifying sight, but nothing unusual on the battlefield. Incris's arm was in excruciating pain. It looked like that kick from the Toad Man had broken your arm, but he clearly wasn't finished. He wanted your life to avenge the one he had trained. Just as he moved to strike, Jem appeared just in time. Never had Incris found the axe in his hands so reliable. Even so, anyone could see that the Toad Man was no pushover. Against Jem's attacks, he was chillingly calm, parrying them with total ease. Jem, on the other hand, was struggling. The fight against the Toad Man left him no time to pay attention to anything else, while you were still lying on the ground, having no idea how many bones you'd broken. With every bone aching and completely unable to sit up, he was being ambushed by some unknown nobody. Out of nowhere, they lunged with a spear to pierce him, but he got lucky. Jackson jumped in just in time and dealt the guy a flying kick to the head, while over here Jem had just been pushed back by the Frogman. But in turn, he had to keep a certain distance from him. "If you want to cut off our captain's head, you'll have to go through me first," Jem declared boldly. The Frogman found this strange and asked, "Captain, this weakling is the captain." "No way. Should it be you?" His question was perfectly reasonable, because compared to Ingrid, Jem looked much more like a captain, but he wasn't in the mood for small talk on the battlefield. While the guy was rambling, James had carefully observed him from head to toe, a warrior lineage and an acting rank. He was truly born to fight. There were only two ways to finish this guy off, either burn him with magic or deliver a strike through his heart. But both ways were incredibly troublesome and difficult to pull off. Both sides maintained a safe distance, watching their opponent intently. While watching acting, the guy also looked at him and felt very curious. Why would someone like him appear on this trivial battlefield? He thought to himself. To take his life, I'd have to risk my own. This battle isn't worth it at all. It was clear. James was full of fiery momentum. His strikes were fast, lethal, and rich in combat experience, not a soft pushover like Ingrid. So after a moment of consideration, acting decided to stop and turned away to leave. "Coward!" Jem spat out. Meanwhile, Jackson was busy as a bee trying to protect his captain. Anyone who wanted to get near Ingrid, without the ability to fight back, was taken down by him in a single blow. This squad, everyone looked stronger than him. They were all fighting with everything they had, while Ingrid had to lie there like this, unable to move a limb. Being a burden to others was no different than torture to him, until Ingrid heard the shouts from the enemy lines. "Retreat, retreat, quickly!" At that moment, every ounce of his strength seemed to be drained away, and he could finally close his eyes in relief. The battle ended right there, and Ingrid fell into a coma once again. Though he was still alive, Ingrid's consciousness, just like the previous time, slipped into that endless void. He met the messenger of hell again, who always wanted to drag him down. "You survived today, but that's all. Because you won't be able to endure the wall standing in your way. Your fate is only despair and giving up." Ingrid really wanted to scream, "Fate, I refuse to lose to such a thing." And so Ingrid struggled to stand up and replied, "A wall, to me walls, are built to be broken." The messenger of hell seemed quite surprised by his answer. He wore a smile full of sarcasm and replied, "I'll be waiting to see the moment those eyes full of selfishness and ambition lose their light." When Ingrid woke up, it was already the next day. There was a lamp hanging above his head. This wasn't his usual sleeping quarters, and there was no shouting for food or groaning about bugs in their boots. "This is the medical tent. You've been sleeping for 2 days straight." Jem sat next to the hospital bed. Seeing him wake up, he spoke. "I saved you from that damn frog, remember?" "That frog? Which frog?" Ingrid sat up. His whole body was wrapped in bandages, making even the slightest movement hurt, like he was dying all over again. When he breathed, his chest also hurt immensely, but this very pain reminded Ingrid that he was still alive. Jem said he didn't break any bones. It was all just soft tissue injuries, but he had a severe head impact. "Do you remember that I'm your best friend?" Jem pointed to himself and asked. "I never acknowledged us as friends, though." Ingrid replied indifferently. Suddenly, he covered Ingrid's mouth tightly, signaled him to be quiet, and then asked, "Are you just blurting that out? Because no one cares about that secret. In the end, are you a stranger or my best friend? Pick one." The two bickered for a while before Ingrid finally felt a sense of reality, that it was a new day, not the same day he had been trapped in for over 4 months. In the end, he had survived. Big Eyes came to visit, and incidentally to demand his money. "Captain, you have to pay me triple. Do you know how much I had to spend to get you in there?" The teenager's face was full of arrogance as he said this. Big Eye's real name was Christ, but Ingrid rarely called him by his real name. He was still wondering why a regular soldier like himself was allowed in the medical tent. It turned out it was because Christ had paid out of his own pocket. "You were nowhere to be seen during the whole battle as usual, huh?" Ingrid asked. Both sides fell silent for a moment before Christ gave a cunning smile and negotiated. "I'm giving you a special discount just for you. Tell you what, just pay double." It was clearly hush money, so Ingrid wouldn't talk about him sneaking off during the battle. The next person to visit Ingrid late in the afternoon was Jackson. He just stood by the hospital bed for a long time without saying anything, making him impatient as hell. Finally, Ingrid had to be the one to speak first. "What is it? If you have something to say, just say it." Jackson didn't answer. Instead, he tossed a jar of medicine to Ingrid. After reminding him to apply it twice morning and night, he left. Ingrid opened the lid of the medicine jar and realized it was the kind of ointment Jackson usually used. But didn't he hate sharing things with others? Why would he be willing to give it to him? Not long after Jackson left, Alden arrived. The moment he saw Ingrid lying on the hospital bed, he started crying and pulled out a crucifix to pray for a long time. Alden was so annoying that it made him furious, so he said, "Go away, I'm not dead yet, so stop crying." Regardless of being chased off, Alden still decided to finish his prayer before leaving. When night fell, Ingrid was finally able to rest in peace for a bit. He lay in the medical tent and wondered why the members of the squad were taking turns visiting him, while before they only ever cared about themselves and were always finding ways to dump their work on him. But now are they doing this because they're worried about him? That's really strange. As Incris was thinking that someone lifted the tent flap, it was another familiar face. "Oh, why are you here, Captain?" This time it was Ragnar. He was munching on an apple. After asking that question, he didn't even wait for Incris to reply before heading back out. Incris felt that Ragnar, of all people, couldn't care less about him. That kid didn't even seem to care about anything at all. Inside the tent, besides him, there were 2 other wounded soldiers. One was a platoon leader from another company, and he used to cause trouble for Incris. If you looked at him for even a second too long, he'd glare at you with those beady owl eyes and roar, "What are you staring at?" The other one. Incris didn't know his name, but all day long he just stared into the void like a total fool. Incris silently assessed him, feeling like he wasn't even a low-ranking soldier. He couldn't understand why he was even in this medical tent. That day, someone else paid an unexpected visit. It was a beautiful woman with elf ears and a noble face. As soon as she appeared, she immediately asked, "Who is the leader of the 444 squad?" Incris felt a bit nervous. Wasn't she asking about him? Yo-jong stood there in silence. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became extremely tense. Vincent seemed to feel uncomfortable, so he raised an eyebrow and asked with a probing tone, "An elf?" She looked curious to know which unit he belonged to, which startled him. He quickly replied, "I am Vincent's platoon leader of the 3rd Platoon 2nd Company." Yo-jong immediately asked in a stern voice, "Does your company not teach you to state your race when meeting a superior?" Vincent could only stammer, bowing his head to apologize for her reprimand. "I apologize." Incris noticed the commotion and glanced over, thinking to himself, "A superior? So that's the new commander of the 4th Company." He took the initiative to introduce himself clearly. "I am Incris, squad leader of the 4th Squad, 4th Platoon, 4th Company." She spoke to him softly, her eyes full of expectation. "I've heard you lead your men very well. I have high hopes for you." Incris thought to himself, filled with doubt at her attitude. Did she come just to say that? Suddenly, Yo-jang's footsteps stopped, as if she had just discovered something. "Wait." She turned around, looked behind, and asked the other person, "And what is your name?" This made Krang, who had been sitting quietly nearby, stunned to be called out. He gave a faint smile and slowly introduced himself. "Krang. Yes, I am Krang." Incris pondered the oddity of the guy next to him. Did he just make that up? His attitude in front of the company commander is terrible too. Is he a noble? After hearing his brief introduction, she didn't bother to say another word. Right after that, Yo-jong quietly turned around and walked out of the room without making a sound. He didn't know what else to say, so he just silently watched her silhouette fade away. The sun had begun to peek out from behind the distant mountain peak. His hand clenched tightly, making the blue veins stand out clearly on his skin. Then he consciously stretched it out comfortably. Incris looked down at his hand and told himself, "The pain has almost disappeared. Now I can make this body stronger. I have to start training." Vincent saw this and jumped up, shouting, "Where are you going?" He replied coolly and briefly, "The training grounds." Vincent didn't care much and leaned back on his chair, muttering continuously, "What a fool, a low-ranking soldier acting all high and mighty." Meanwhile, Krang still sat silently in the corner of the room, looking into the distance with a thoughtful gaze, yet seemingly indifferent to everything around him. His sword tip pointed straight upward, catching the sunlight, creating a blinding glare. He had to remember the previous battle. It was one of the few useful things he'd spent a ton of money to learn. Incris began to recall that life-or-death moment. The final thrust. What if it had failed? His two hands gripped the iron sword tightly as he realized, indeed, one shouldn't put all their eggs in one basket. If that attack failed, I'd be done for. Incris instinctively thought of Jem. Jem's axe attacks were always lethal blows. After using all his strength to thrust, the next step would be. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the air. "You're really diligent." Those words brought him back to reality. He turned and saw Krang sitting nearby. He asked with curiosity, "I don't understand what you're doing. Back in the tent, your hand was already twitching. Now you're out here staring at something again." Incris responded calmly, in an even tone. "I'm doing this to train my grip strength. I'm simulating the battle." He looked puzzled by that answer. "Why do that?" He answered straight, without hesitation. "So I don't run into trouble." Krang's eyes showed indifference. Then he pressed on. "And then what, you're saving your life to become what?" The noble thing he always wanted to become was the biggest dream of his life. But if he said it here, people would surely mock him. It was a great dream that he was working toward with his own humble talent. But no matter what, he had never stopped burning with the desire to achieve it. Incris once again pointed his sharp sword toward the high sky, then he instinctively blurted out two short but heavy words, "Night." Hearing those two words, Krang's eyes immediately widened, and he stood frozen, completely stunned. He stole a glance at him to see what his next reaction would be. Incris said enigmatically, "This is the first time I've seen that." Krang asked with curiosity. "Seen what?" He answered frankly, "Seen someone not laugh at me." He used both hands to push off his thighs to stand up, then said, "I forgot. I suddenly remembered." Krang turned around and left. Incred said meaningfully, "This is the first time I've seen this." Graham asked curiously, "Seen what?" He replied straightforwardly, "Seen someone not laughing at me." He used his hands to push off his thighs to stand up, then said, "I forgot about that. But suddenly I remembered." Krang turned and walked away, but he didn't forget to look back at him to give some instructions. Looking at him, I knew what I had to do. Just like that, Inglis watched him walk away in silence, thinking to himself that this was the first time he had felt supported by someone. A cryptic smile played on the corners of Inglis's mouth. "If you become a knight, remember my name, my friend." By now, all the tents in the military camp had been fully set up by the soldiers, and the place was filled with loud chatter and debates about who the hero on the battlefield was. Down below Cyprus, Vengeance shouted angrily, after waking up to the same old song and dance. "Why isn't breakfast here yet? Are they planning to eat it all and feed us leftovers? Planning to finish it all and give me the scraps?" He decided to wander around a bit instead of heading to the training grounds as usual. Just then, Jackson asked, "Captain, how are your wounds?" Inglis turned back and replied softly, "The medicine works well, thank you." However, his eyes immediately snapped shut as he added, "If you're grateful, then hurry back." A short while later, a small candle was lit, burning brightly inside the dark room. He pulled the thick blanket up over his body before lying down to sleep, not forgetting to wish his friend next to him a good night. "Good night, Inglis." He also pulled the blanket over himself and replied briefly, "You too." All he did was go to sleep early. On the other side of the bed, Vengeance was a bit annoyed and kept grumbling irritably, "Those bastards talking all night." And so another day went by where they hadn't accomplished anything. Nothing at all. Early the next morning, the familiar shouting rang out again. "Cyprus, who is the hero on the battlefield?" Inglis had to prop himself up to sit thinking. "The wandering musician is here again. I thought he was traveling around." He still held on to that same grumpy attitude from yesterday, shouting loudly, "Why isn't breakfast here yet? Do they plan to eat it all and give us the leftovers?" He immediately looked to the side, thinking wearily, "He's so loud. He said the exact same thing yesterday." Suddenly, Inglis's eyes widened in horror, as if he had just seen something truly terrifying happening right before his eyes. Beads of sweat trickled down his pale face, accompanied by a fearful realization. Could it be that today, Jackson approached him again with the same question, "Captain, how are your wounds?" Inglis could only respond subconsciously, "The medicine works well, thank you." He continued to say the exact same sentence as yesterday. A truly terrifying and insane truth was about to be brought to light. He was absolutely certain that the events of today were repeating exactly like yesterday's. Once again, another solid wall would block his progress. So try your best to stay alive. Inglis stood there, stunned, his heart filled with dread as he questioned himself. Did I die at some point while I was asleep? He stood frozen next to the large wall. This time was even more hopeless than when he was stabbed. Even though it was incredibly frustrating, Inglis stared up at the ceiling with firm determination. But I am even more determined. Another challenge awaited. The flickering candle was lit by someone. He lay still on the bed, hands gripping the blanket, constantly speculating. Who killed me and how? He had to get past all the guards to get in here. Only a knight could do that. Inglis's eyes widened, staring into the void. It's impossible. He must be an anonymous assassin, and it's highly likely that person is among us. They knew the location of the medical tent and hid. Someone very skilled at assassination. His expression showed extreme terror. The swift, silent feet of the elf race were perfect for assassination. Inglis suddenly remembered Eojang from that day. It turned out she had come to confirm the location beforehand. She had walked into the tent with such ease and naturalness. He silently came to a conclusion to plan a countermeasure. I must see it to confirm it. The medical tent only had one entrance. He could scream to wake the other soldiers when he met her. Inglis decided to lie still on the bed, just waiting for the assassin to arrive. Suddenly, from behind a small, rusty needle pierced his neck painfully. Inglis's eyes widened, filled with resentment along with the thought, poison needle. He was in so much pain that he writhed on the bed. He hadn't even seen his attacker yet. His large body tumbled to the floor, leaving him completely unable to move or speak. It's a paralyzing poison. He clenched his teeth to endure the pain. Is this the reason I died without knowing it? Suddenly, his gaze fell on the terrifying foam at the corners of Vengeance's mouth. Others. Squad leader Vengeance. Right after that, Inglis noticed the silhouette of the assassin Graham. His whole body was trembling violently from the pain. He roared in his heart filled with rage. It's that bastard, he raised his sharp sword, aiming straight at the spot where Graham was lying on the ground. The assassin delivered a decisive and cruel stab right into Graham's chest. Even though he was dead, his eyes were still wide open. Fresh blood flowed endlessly from his mouth onto the ground. Witnessing this brutal scene left Inglis absolutely horrified. Blood vessels immediately bulged around his eyes. Right at that moment, a sharp sword from outside stabbed through, decisively tearing the thick canvas of the tent in two. Someone else was looking in from outside. He had accomplices. He could only lie motionless on the ground, glancing around. Immediately, Inglis noticed the distinct long ears of the person standing at the tent entrance, along with the staff of power clutched in the other hand. He finally reached a conclusion in his desperation. So it was her after all. That person was none other than Yeo Zhang. The morning of the next day of an endless loop continued exactly the same as before, with the same familiar shouting. Who is the hero on the battlefield, Cyprus? Inglis could only sit silently on the hospital bed. This was the third morning exactly like this. His gaze gradually became deeply bewildered. I've been on alert, but I haven't detected anyone. This won't be easy. Inglis suddenly recalled the silhouette of the person, covered in a cloak from last night, and thought to himself, and that squad leader too. Even if I manage to stop the assassination immediately after, I will have to face her. He sighed wearily at the helpless dead-end situation. Inglis sat with his head bowed to the ground. A few days ago, he had this same feeling. He instinctively thought of the talented knights who appeared in the recent battle. Even so, in that life-or-death battle, you were still the one who came out on top, right? The severed head floating in midair. I'll definitely find a way. Ingris slowly stood up, walked out of the tent, and gazed up at that vast blue sky. He silently cheered himself on. Just don't give up. As night fell, he deliberately gave the blanket a hard, sharp tug. Vengers, his sleep ruined, jumped up and shouted angrily, "What's wrong with you today? Are you crazy?" Ingris thought to himself. It seems my theory that the assassins infiltrated the base was wrong. Then I need to be on guard against the outside, too. The old man cursed. Are you out of your mind? Planning to practice snake catching with a sword today or something. Venger's lips curled into a mocking smirk. Right. That kind of thing is suitable for low-level soldiers. He calmly turned around and retorted, I didn't expect you to care about me so much. The old man shouted in frustration, I'm talking about the situation, you idiot. Increase sighed slightly. He took a breath and explained, I was just teasing you. Venger snapped, cut the racket and get lost. I don't want to see your face. Right at that tense moment, Graham walked in from outside and asked, Are you two arguing again? Noticing the awkward atmosphere, he politely offered, I'll come back later. He shrugged and replied, It's fine, come in. The old man turned away, clutching his pillow. Such annoying guys. Ingrid's eyes suddenly darted toward Graham's back, scrutinizing him. He silently formed a suspicious conclusion. The assassins are watching him very closely. He must be their primary target. He is really suspicious. But who could he possibly be? Increase chose to remain silent and observe. He didn't intend to dig deep into things that the other person wouldn't volunteer. He glanced toward the soldiers lying on the hospital beds. Just like those other bastards, Increase started to ponder. But it's because of him that I got dragged into this assassination attempt. So at the very least, he called out Graham. Increase silently decided to just ask for clarity. The question was posed, What exactly are you? Upon hearing that sudden question, Graham suddenly went terrifyingly quiet. His expression shifted so quickly that Increase felt confused. Did I say something wrong? I guess my communication skills are only on par with Gem's. Graham slowly turned to look at him and repeated the question. What am I, you ask? That? He appeared incredibly hesitant for a long time, then coldly said, I can't tell you. Increase pressed him. Why? Graham sighed helplessly. It's a long story. His thin lips pressed tightly together. Increase decisively turned to leave if that was what he was going to say. Just then, Vengers, from the bed across the room, said loudly, Are you kidding me? You wanted to hear the answer right. If you're going to be that hesitant, you're better off not asking, you blockhead. The old man stood up and pointed directly at the person across from him. Graham or crap or whatever, you are definitely not from this kingdom. I can tell just by looking. Tell the truth, which country are you a spy for? Graham's eyes suddenly stared at him with intense anxiety. Vengers immediately froze, unable to say another word. Graham's feet moved slowly. Carrying an overwhelming sense of authority, he stepped forward one by one right up to the old man. He stated firmly, I have never, and I will never betray the kingdom. You could see it in his eyes and his gestures. It was that aura of integrity, typical of a true knight. Venger shouted furiously, Is that how you speak to your superiors? Graham laughed aloud. Yes, sir. Increase thought. Graham is not a knight because even he was helpless when facing the assassins. But then the corner of his mouth twitched. He is definitely hiding something. The small candle in the tent was lit as usual. Good night, Ingrid whispered, covering himself with the blanket. Good night to you too. The old man lay on the other side, lowering his voice. Increase was completely puzzled. Is he scared of Graham now? Why is he suddenly speaking so softly? He glanced toward their beds to observe further. Increase stared into the distance through a small gap in the tent. If the assassins storm in, we will all die. Immediately after, he slammed his sword into the ground to pull himself up, which confused the old man. Venger, seeing Increase intending to go out in the middle of the night, shouted, What are you doing? Go back to sleep. He replied coldly, The assassins are about to attack. If you want to live, work with me. Hearing that the old man couldn't help but question reality, Vengers turned away toward the wall. What a psycho. Increase glanced back at Graham. He thought to himself with a sigh, I predicted that reaction. Suddenly a voice rang out. How did he find out we were coming here to assassinate him? Immediately his eyes widened, his whole body tensing up. From the outside, a sharp object suddenly pierced through the canvas, grazing Increase's neck, causing blood to splatter instantly. He only had time to glance behind him. His hands hurriedly reached for the sword at his waist. But at that moment, the assassin had already taken out Vengers. Next, Graham was also struck down. His body lost its balance and he fell hard to the ground. Immediately after, a familiar cheer echoed in his ears. "Who is the hero on the battlefield, Cyprus?" This was the fourth time Increase sat holding his head, because there was no evidence to prove the assassins were coming. He couldn't rely on Vengers or Graham to help. "I have to report to my superiors to increase the guard," the old man shouted from the side. "Have you lost your mind?" "Must report to the superiors to reinforce the guard," the man over there shouted. "Are you out of your mind? Get lost before I make sure you never speak again." He thought to himself, "I'll predict the exact moment the assassins show up and scream a warning before they strike." A sudden chill swept into the tent. Was this the moment? Ingrid's lips pressed tightly together. He focused all his mental energy on sensing his surroundings. Perhaps right now, but a sharp blade pierced through Ingrid's neck from behind. As the steel was drawn out, bright red blood sprayed everywhere. The assassin's speed was truly inhuman. "Damn it!" he cursed under his breath. "They're too fast." Another night passed and he braced himself again. He couldn't ask anyone else for help. "I have to ambush and take them out before they even move." The enemy's hidden hand in the shadows once again launched a poisoned needle piercing straight through Ingrid's throat. How could he fight back when he couldn't even see who the enemy was? Their movements were completely invisible to him, yet they saw everything. If you can't even dodge a basic poisoned needle like that, you'll never accomplish anything in this loop. The next morning came. Everything went exactly according to the same old routine. A shout rang out. "Who is the hero on the battlefield?" "Cyprus." Ingrid's hand clenched into a fist, trembling with rage. "The 20th morning, and I still can't do anything." He was spiraling, completely shattered. 20 times in a row. His thin lips remained tightly pursed, suppressing the wave of helplessness. Suddenly, a small, subtle smile quirked at the corner of Ingrid's mouth. He calmed himself down. "I've only died 20 times. Ingrid stood up decisively. He had to find a way to dodge the poison first, before even thinking about taking them down. He looked at the person sitting in front of him, the key to avoiding the attack. Before the enemy even spotted him, Jackson, at this moment, was sitting alone, sharpening his own blade. Ingrid called out to him, then stood there focusing his gaze on the other man. A sudden question bubbled up in his mind. Why was Jackson such a twisted stray cat? He raised an eyebrow and asked him that directly. Jackson let out a mocking laugh. "How do you think he fights?" Ingrid explained. "He never fights head-on. He likes to stab them in the back and run." He continued with a humorous, mocking tone. "Doesn't that sound just like a cunning, twisted stray cat?" Jackson spoke up. "Captain." He looked up, asking, "How's your wound?" Ingrid thought, "I'm sure he could easily defeat those assassins." He pondered, "But I can't keep him by my side. I don't have the right to do that even if I wanted to." Ingrid thought of the assassin. "That wall, I have to climb it myself." He spoke softly. "So Jackson." A realization dawned on Ingrid. "I'll become as good as Jackson." He called out, "If someone like you stabbed me in the back, what should I do to block that attack?" Jackson looked thoughtful, saying nothing for a moment. Then he replied nonchalantly, "I don't know. No one has ever survived being ambushed by me." That statement made Ingrid freeze, his eyes widening. After saying those words, he fell silent, not moving a muscle. Jackson's gaze now remained vacantly fixed on the empty space like a bottomless pit. He lowered his head toward the ground. A few minutes later, Jackson looked up. He kept rubbing the back of his neck then. Yahello said, "You need eyes on the back of your head." That strange advice left Ingrid completely baffled, a giant question mark appearing in his mind. He asked back in confusion, "Eyes on the back of my head? What are you talking about, eh?" He gestured with his chin toward the front and said, "See that cart over there?" Ingrid was even more skeptical. "A cart?" He turned around to look in the direction indicated. Behind the camp, Ingrid noticed the distant cart, completely bewildered. How could he see something so far away? Does he really have eyes in the back of his head? Jackson's voice dropped. "That cart is about to break." Suddenly, the person pulling the cart in the distance stumbled, and the wheel rolled right off the axle. This sudden turn of events left Ingrid truly stunned. He asked the other man suspiciously, "Jackson, are you a prophet?" Jackson scoffed. "What kind of talk is that, or have you—" "I've been hanging out with the Manzi tribe and caught their sickness." Ingrid's voice grew serious. "Stop joking around. Tell me how you did it." Jackson gently pointed to his ear. "Sound," he clarified slowly. "I heard the joints of the wheel shaking." His expression became incredibly serious. "Once I hear it, I can predict what's going to happen next." Ingrid, after hearing the explanation, froze. He could hear a sound that small. "I can barely even hear a cart approaching, let alone that." Jackson added, "That means you don't necessarily need your eyes to grasp everything." He slowly stood up from his seat and said, "If you want to train your skills like mine, you can try listening, focus your senses, and follow the sounds, even the smallest ones." Ingrid shrugged and remarked, "You're explaining it quite thoroughly. Usually you find anything I ask annoying." Jackson sighed. "It's still annoying." He turned his head and continued, "But that's better than you nagging in my ear forever." Jackson let out a small, cryptic smile. "Lately, Captain, it seems like you've decided not to give up, haven't you?" Night has fallen over the camp. Increed keeps his eyes squeezed shut, lying perfectly still on his bed. "This is the second wall I must overcome," the assassin. The masked figure strikes again, launching a large needle, an invisible scythe of death hurtling toward him. His eyes remain tight shut. Only by seeing it can he survive. Increed focuses every ounce of his attention on his ears, listening to every movement, the steady footsteps of the sentry, the crackling of the fire. The assassin moves with incredible stealth. Increed lies motionless on the bed in deep concentration, constantly asking himself, "Where is he? Where?" He sets his feet down with such lightness that there isn't a sound, save for the leaves rustling as they fall. It puts him in a difficult position. Where is that sound coming from? The assassin, hidden in the shadows, springs up and lunges forward. And of course, a familiar poisonous needle pierces deep into Increed's neck immediately after. The pain is intense, and he realizes that failure is once again inevitable. The next morning begins with the familiar shouting. He realizes he hasn't improved even a little. Increed slowly steps out of the tent and whispers to himself, "But my body remembers the memories of those days of training where I forged a brave heart and sharp sword strikes." Jackson says there is a lot of information one can gather just by listening. You can determine positions based on the direction and intensity of the sound, and when you can hear the smallest sounds from a long distance. He stammers. "If you can, your ears will become your second pair of eyes." Jackson raises his hand and snaps his fingers, gesturing around as he explains. "Sound is a wave. These waves are always around us, even in the quietest places. Amidst thousands of complex intertwining sound waves, that hand clenches shut. Capture a single wave." Jackson looks around and says, "That's how I was able to break that bastard's neck. Have you been to that village yet? There's a beautiful girl there," Increed thinks to himself. In that chaotic mess of sound waves, which ones are blending together? Listen, distinguish, and grasp them. He looks up at the flag flying high above, the sound of the flag flapping. It sounds like only one flag. How many flags are here? 710. Then his gaze drops to people's feet. 3 people nearby, 2 further away. Increed's eyes squeeze shut once again. Feel it. Feel the sound waves. The familiar sounds echo back a bird in the sky diving down, and even strange, unfamiliar noises. Suddenly a loud voice calls out from behind him. Breaking his concentration, Gran arrives with a bag of items on his shoulder, asking, "What's the training exercise this time?" He is quite surprised and asks back, "Increed you?" Gran chuckles. "Increed or Incris, it's the same if you like." Increed shakes his head. "I don't really like it, but if you want to call me that, go ahead." He keeps his eyes closed. "I was just sitting here resting. How does that look like a training exercise to you?" Gran smiles sinisterly. "You're not someone who would just loaf around, right?" Increed glances at a leaf falling past his face. That night, that needle appears again, plunging directly into his neck. Increed feels intense pain and lets out ragged breaths. The assassin has driven a blade straight into Krang's stomach. He pulls the sword out, blood staining the blade. Krang is in too much pain from the extraction to even speak. Ingrid's face darkens. This is the third no, the third failure. After that, everything repeats for the 34th time. He still hears nothing. In the end, the result is still the same failure, and Krang's death seems fated. The next morning, in the far-off day, Ingrid sits quietly on the ground, focusing on overcoming this difficult wall. It doesn't just need motivation, it needs concentration. His eyes are squeezed shut. Everything here is about effort. It doesn't come from sudden enlightenment or divine intervention. The assassin keeps moving silently. You just have to repeat the simplest things. That bird dives down again like all the other times. No stopping, no ceasing to think, observe, and listen. That night plays out again. The assassin appears as he has many times before. Another day passes, and Ingrid is still sitting there looking ahead. Gran appears in front of him again, asking, "I snuck up on you, and you knew. How did you open your eyes so fast?" Gran is suspicious. He thought Ingrid had his eyes closed the whole time. Or are you practicing sensing killing intent? You're not someone who just loafs around, are you? This question makes Ingrid freeze. The assassin attacks again. The needle heads straight for his neck, but this time Ingrid tilts his head to dodge it. He grips the sword that he had hidden under his pillow. This time Ingrid lunges forward, actively attacking the assassin. The attacker falls backward, nearly defeated by him. The guy grinds his teeth in amazement. Ingrid breaks into a wicked smile. From now on, he is no longer an invisible scythe of death. The guy quickly clenches his fists. Laate, Taselfi, Yefahade, and lunges to attack Ingrid again. You bastard. However, this time, Ingrid easily dodges the dangerous blow. Ingrid thinks silently. This assassin is only good at sneak attacks. As for close quarters combat, he's not as good as the one who killed me so many times on the battlefield before. He might be a worthy opponent to test myself against. His eyes focus, observing the chaotic fight. While others are around, Ingrid glances toward Vincent's position. Vincent's is, and immediately after, he sees the image of Krang bravely getting back up. Krang is fighting. He silently concludes, "Although everyone is awake and fighting, I still need to be careful. That masked assassin is still proving to be very strong. He isn't strong in close combat, but at least he is an assassin." He decisively throws a sharp blade straight ahead. The treacherous arc of the blade grazes past Ingrid. This inadvertently causes him to lose his active defense momentarily. Suddenly, a familiar figure flashes quickly toward him from behind. Ingrid's teeth instantly clench together, and sure enough, he has detected it in time. It is Eojang's squad leader, Eojang. She has appeared. Ingrid quickly lunges forward. "I need to strike fast." He holds his knife, thrusting it straight toward her. If not, he will fail. The assassin sees the disadvantage and immediately throws countless poisonous needles. You called for backup. The toxic needles flew like bullets straight toward Ingrid, but she suddenly pulled back instinctively to dodge them. Her sharp eyes caught the attack just in time, and as the assassin launched forward, Eojang swiftly leaped high into the air. A single tiny needle accidentally pierced the hem of her robe, and as soon as she landed, Eojang stepped in front to shield both of them from the remaining needles. He thought to himself with a pang of regret, "I thought she was involved with these assassins, but it looks like she came here to save everyone instead." Then Ingrid immediately spun around, her eyes filled with intensity as she locked onto the enemy and lunged straight at the assassin. Naturally, this gave their side a significant advantage. Seeing this, the assassin was visibly startled, but as an experienced fighter, he had already anticipated such a move. He quickly raised his sword to block Ingrid's attack, his teeth gritted in frustration. Damn it! The assassin swiftly maneuvered and slipped away. In the blink of an eye, he vanished from the tent completely. The surrounding area fell into silence once more. He got away. Grang approached and spoke up. "It seems that assassin was targeting me." Ingrid nodded. "I know." Grang looked clearly puzzled by his answer. How could you possibly know that?" He bluntly replied. "That assassin calculated his target carefully before acting. It seems like neither I nor the others had anything to do with them." Eojang agreed. "That's right. Which is why that assassin is quite dangerous. Good thing I arrived in time." Her lips curled into an appreciative smile. I'm quite surprised by your reaction to this situation, squad leader. Ingrid involuntarily recalled the image of the cane that appeared back then. I know the captain came here to protect everyone, but I don't know the relationship between her and Grang. What if she's keeping secrets for Grang? His eyes were now full of suspicion and judgment as he looked at them both, his hand tightening around his blade in constant vigilance. I've become a target myself. I need to be on guard. He suddenly looked across and felt a bit surprised when Grang turned to look at him and said, I have something I want to say. He lowered his voice. Because of me, everyone got dragged into this. I wish no one had to lose their life today. Ingrid listened in silence. Yuzhang bowed her head slightly and continued, I hope that wish can be fulfilled. Grang looked around anxiously and noticed Venzin's had been poisoned. It's unlikely he'll pull through. I wonder if anyone else in the camp has been dragged into this because of me. She reassured him, Don't worry, there's an antidote. He might not die yet. He thought to himself, It seems the captain knows quite a lot about poisons. He lowered his voice and suggested, All right, let's deal with this place first. It's too chaotic here. We need to be quick or it'll be a hassle once everyone starts swarming in. Ingrid added, We can search for information the assassin left at the scene to learn more about him. He glanced outside. The way he acted. He definitely left many clues. Just then, a large fire suddenly erupted outside, burning fiercely. Everyone in the camp was in a panic. Running everywhere. Fire. Everyone hurry up and put out the fire. Ingrid was sitting by Venzin's bedside and shouted, Hey, get over here quickly. He thought to himself, furious. That bastard of an assassin. Before leaving, he even set a fire to cover his tracks. Ingrid stood up and looked around, feeling frustrated. Now finding clues about him will be much harder. In another corner, Yuzhang said softly, If he hadn't woken up in time to warn you, you would have died. She stated frankly, The reason you trust him is it because of his strength and courage. Grang nodded slowly in reply, That's right. Don't you think he's a reliable person? Yuzhang fell into deep thought after hearing that. He wondered to himself, feeling troubled. I've tried to keep a low profile in this camp, but I don't understand why the assassins kept coming. Meanwhile, Ingrid was still extremely persistent with his training on the other side. Grang was taking a walk and suddenly stopped in his tracks, his lips curving slightly. I've been too complacent. I hope nothing like this happens to everyone again. He looked off into the distance. Well then, goodbye. I hope to see you all again. His axe touched the murky water. Immediately after, it slowly dissolved, which was very strange. Ingrid stood silently watching the person sitting alone on the boat. Suddenly, a cold voice emerged. We'll meet again soon. He spoke in a cold tone with high determination. I will find you no matter what. Under the clear sky the next day, he had finally escaped the loop. He had truly survived and escaped that haunting, silent death. This was the morning after the battle with the assassin. Ingrid thought to himself, I feel like I have a better grasp of what I've heard and observed. But the appearance of the squad leader is something I completely cannot figure out. I'll probably need more training to increase my strength further. He grabbed his bag, slung it over his shoulder. It's truly lucky that I wasn't injured at all last night. Suddenly, a voice spoke up. Thanks to your warning, I was saved. From the fire last night. He questioned, Why did you save me like that? Ingrid felt confused. How strange what's going on, I saved him. But now he's acting like he's blaming me. I don't understand what I did wrong. He didn't understand what he was doing wrong. You turn away, and since the person who saved you is my comrade saving you, is nothing worth mentioning, right? Hearing that blunt reply, Vengeance just stays silent, not saying another word. He felt a bit of remorse afterward. I've done so many wrong things to you, yet you still treat me so well, Venzons asked softly, thanking him. Where are you going now? Increase replies shortly. I'm heading out to train. He looks a bit puzzled. Right now, after yesterday's fire, the barracks are in. A lot of weird chaos, you know. You turn back to ask what he means. Venger says quietly, There's a rumor that our barracks have been hit by a deadly curse. In another scene, Ragnar is gritting his teeth, saying, Don't be so full of yourself, you bastard. Right after saying that, he forcefully shoves James by the shoulder, his lips curling into a sneer. Everyone witnessing the scene starts scattering. "Hey, are you two crazy? Why are you fighting in the barracks? Does this bastard want to die? Where are the squad leaders? Get over here quickly and manage your team members." How could you let them act like this? They see the chaotic fight and run away. Damn it, this isn't good. If you stand up, you're dead meat. At that moment, Ragnar unleashed a powerful counterattack aimed at Jem. He didn't hold back at all, throwing a massive punch to retaliate. Jem's eyebrows furrowed tight. "Fine, that's how it is. Then, let me use this axe to give you a haircut." A shout echoes, "Hey, don't use weapons." Ragnar isn't one to lose, either brandishing his sharp sword to challenge him. "If you're good enough, come at me and see who dies first. Stop them, someone. There's going to be a murder." Increase stands outside observing. He doesn't understand where that groundless rumor came from. He sighs, but perhaps it really is true that many complicated things are happening now. Increase walks and slowly stopping. "Hurry up, squad leader, you're here. You actually survived yesterday's fire. Well, whatever. Hurry up and stop these two. They've lost their minds. I'm not dead yet. All right, if you two really want to fight to the death, at least let me know why the hell you're doing this." 3 days have passed since returning to the squad. Increase is quietly resting on his familiar bed when suddenly he hears a sound and opens his eyes to check. The person who just walked into the tent is Jackson. Their eyes meet. He speaks softly, a bit surprised. "I walked in without making a sound. Did I wake you up?" Increase sits up slowly and explains, "No. I was planning to get up and train anyway." Jackson looks visibly surprised by his keen senses. "You haven't been practicing sound perception for long, have you? How are you this good already?" You shrug. "Because I've been practicing hard." Jackson says seriously, "Keep training harder. It will help you on the battlefield." The cold winter weather is approaching, causing the battles to thin out. Increase keeps his old routine training intensely every single day. Even with all that they have more free time, it's the perfect time to train. Behind a large rock nearby, a familiar voice suddenly rings out. "Good morning, squad leader." You quickly put on your shirt and look at the rock, puzzled. Increase calls out, "Alden." He is doing push-ups with a rock on his back, sweat pouring down. He replies, "Out for morning training. How diligent." Suddenly crushed by the rock, he continues in a serious tone, "You should think about it carefully." Increase witnesses the ridiculous scene and can only watch in silence. Alden continues to assert that a strong body is like a sturdy shield. Alden walks over, smiling encouragingly. "At least try to withstand one of Brooke's kicks." His hand clenches into a fist and he says, "You're still weak. You need to train much more." Increase chuckles to himself. The guy talks as if he's so strong. "You don't hesitate to admit, I still have many shortcomings." Alden puts his hands on his hips and presses. "And what about the muscle training method I showed you?" Meanwhile, on this side of the barracks, James just kicked Ragnar away along with his bed. He grinds his teeth and scolds, "You lazy bastard, all you do is eat and sleep all day. You useless piece of trash." He doesn't say a word back, but just silently crawls to his feet. Afterward, Ragnar reaches out to grab the sword leaning there. He spins around to the back and shouts in fury, "Take your stuff and get out of here." James, of course, isn't backing down, reaching behind his back to grab his axe. At that very moment, Increase and Auden walk in. You look at them and complain, "Fighting again." You remind them, "Both of you stop." Auden adds, "Violence can't solve anything." Ren points behind him. "That directionally challenged idiot is trying to starve us. He's too lazy." Auden hears this and says softly to Ragnar, "Since the squad leader asked, just handle breakfast." Ragnar tilts his head. "Since the squad leader said so." James holds the towel in his hand, mocking, "The bastard finally decides to do some work playing hard to get." Ragnar jerks his hand away, furious, his voice gruff. "Pack your things and get out of here. It stinks to high heaven." He held a handkerchief to his nose and sniffed. "It smells so fragrant, though. What is up with him, Increment? I told you to stop causing trouble. Or are you just bored and have nothing better to do?" Jen's lips curled up. "You've realized it, haven't you? You're not allowed to go to the front lines." My hands and feet are itching for a fight, he said in a serious tone, gripping his sword hilt. Stop whining and come out here for a duel. Outside, the sky was covered in dark clouds. Powerful and precise strikes were being unleashed by both sides against their opponent. James swung his axe and roared, "Take this! Your stamina is pathetic!" No sooner had he finished speaking than he nimbly thrusted his sword to counter James's heavy blow. He kept trying to tell himself, "Maintain focus with the heart of a beast." The massive axe was brought down decisively from above. Two metal weapons collided head-on. A jarring, piercing sound rang out. Listen and dodge every strike with keen ears, and the fatal thrusts honed through hundreds of failures. Incris gritted his teeth after the slash. He could see the danger coming, and right at that moment, Incris slashed his sword horizontally across his head once more. After dodging, James used his axe to hook the sword, then quickly grabbed the boy by the collar with his free hand. Incris was dragged away by that immense force. It caught him completely off guard, and then James slammed him hard into the ground. Thump Incris let out a cry of pain. He gave a faint smile and remarked, "I had expected quite a bit after seeing how much you've improved. Still this fight." James looked visibly confused and asked bluntly, "How can you be so boring and still be this weak?" "That thrust is old news. I've already figured out the weakness in that move. Do you not have any other moves?" Incris propped his sword against the ground, drenched in sweat. "But now I understand." He recalled the past. "I'm not the same as I used to be, in both spirit and body." Incris's gaze looked upward. "Even if I have to repeat this hundreds, thousands of times, I will keep moving forward." His voice turned serious. "Come on. This time I'm going to crush you," Jen thought to himself, mocking what a mediocre skill. But Incris's eyes were incredibly determined right now. His thin lips curled up, wondering, "And yet why can't I take my eyes off that look? Why?" Jen smirked. "You should at least try to touch a single strand of my hair." Just then, the sky suddenly poured down with heavy rain. Both of them were immediately drawn in by the sound of the downpour. The torrential rain fell, creating a pitter-patter sound on the tents. Incris stood inside the tent, looking out as the rain stopped and started erratically. Jen sat on the side, lifting his leg to check it. "Damn it, with this much rain, I'm going to get athlete's foot." On this side, Rachna was resting while Alden sat by the bed chanting something. Chris opened the tent and walked in complaining. How many times has the plan been ruined because of the rain already? He pulled at his hair in frustration. "It really feels like a curse has been cast over our camp," Incris asked. "A curse, you say?" Chris turned to him. "You haven't heard about it, squad leader," he thought to himself. "Now that he mentions it, I seem to remember Captain Vengeance saying something before I returned." Back then, Vengeance had said there was a curse spreading throughout the camp. Chris lay down on the bed, wiping his head with a towel, and continued. "The weather is strange. The number of wounded soldiers has spiked, and there are fires too, especially in the reconnaissance team. Jack Bo Roten. So many people are injured. Everyone is gossiping that it's all because of the curse," Chris said softly. "Of course there's no such thing as a curse here, but the weather really is changing erratically. It's like there's magic messing with this camp, so the rumors are spreading like wildfire." Incris judged that it wouldn't be good to let baseless rumors spread within the camp, so the higher-ups will stop it soon. He wondered. "But hey, why are you just standing at the door?" Incris replied, practicing feeling the energy. Grace was puzzled. In this rainstorm, Incris nodded. "It's precisely because it's raining so hard that I have to practice." James was bewildered. "What kind of cat-and-mouse game are you playing? Standing there like that is just asking for bad luck." Jackson noted that it wasn't a bad training method, saying, "You're doing quite well." James heard the voice and turned around to look. Then James shouted, "What the hell, you're teaching him? Since when did you start caring about the squad leader, huh? This insolent bastard dares to ignore me." Incris just looked at the rain and sighed. "It's too noisy. I can't even hear the rain anymore." Alden spoke up. "If you want to find training exercises, there are many ways to train, even while sitting in one place." Ragnar turned around. "It's been a while, let me check your sword stance," Jen thought to himself. "What? Look at that. Do they want to train even when they're in here?" Jackson quietly glanced to the side where Alden was still smiling very brightly and meaningfully. Ragnar's thin lips also curled slightly. Jen smirked and thought, "You see it now, don't you? Everyone is very hard-working. It's not just you." Incris's gaze also slowly looked to the side. Outside, the rain was still pouring hard. A voice rang out. "Tell the captains to control their soldiers. The commander requested that we need to send another reconnaissance team to scout the situation before winter comes. But there aren't enough soldiers to fill the gaps in the camp." Yuzhong thought for a moment, then spoke up. "What about the 444th squad leader?" he asked that unknown squad leader. "He seems a bit incompetent, don't you think? Will he hinder the reconnaissance team?" She closed her eyes. Who knows, maybe he'll bring back unexpected results. He wondered, "You have a reason for thinking that?" Yuzhong lowered her voice and explained, It was just the elf's intuition. By the next day, the skies had cleared and the air felt incredibly crisp. Incred stood in the command room facing Yuzhong, hesitating. "I'm incredibly confused by the commander's decision to choose me for the recon team, aren't you?" She didn't rush to answer, just gently rested her chin on her hands. As soon as you stepped back into the room, a question was posed. "Were you summoned by the platoon leader?" Incred replied in a low voice. "Do you think I'm that simple, just letting her boss me around whenever she wants?" Grace wondered. "Then why did you go there? She ordered you to go on a scouting mission, right?" He involuntarily recalled what happened earlier. She had been paying attention to him ever since that assassination attempt by those killers. His gaze turned indifferent. Since that day, Krang had also left the barracks. Jem, who was listening nearby, immediately blurted out, "So you're really going? Even if you don't like the task, the platoon leader assigned you could have just told her," he said while cleaning his axe. Incred replied, "All right, enough talk. Since a superior officer assigned it, I have to comply," James said in a bored tone. "Ugh, what a model squad leader." He shrugged. "I'm just setting an example for everyone. If I don't do it, everything around here will fall into chaos." Auden turned inward, wailing, "Oh God, why do you give me such difficult challenges? Anyway, I pray that you can achieve what you're hoping for. And above all, that you survive those dangerous missions." Incred thought to himself, "This is absolutely exhausting." Suddenly, Ragnar, who was lying on the bed, sat up. "Let me go," he volunteered, offering to go in his place. He shook his head. "No, it's not okay. You don't have the experience for this kind of work." Christ agreed. "He's right, Ragnar," Jen chimed in. "You have your strengths in other areas, but you're not on his level when it comes to this." Jackson suddenly asked from the side, "So the exact location the platoon leader mentioned is the vast field, right?" He warned, "If you hear any sound other than the wind and the grass while you're out there, stay alert. That's quite unusual. That's the basic way to avoid being ambushed." Zen shouted, "Are you trying to lecture the squad leader again? You only have a knack for sneak attacks. Anyway, you don't have any experience in scouting." Incred sighed. "So annoying. If I leave, who is going to keep them in check? If I leave them like this, they're going to start fighting again." His eyes looked indifferent, lost in thought. But even thinking about it over and over, there really was no one more suitable to go there than him. After joining the army, he had no special abilities. Because of that, he was often sent to undesirable places. He had worked in every position but lacked real experience. The place where he felt most useful. The air in the tent suddenly became tense as Jem grabbed his battle axe and charged. "You bastard!" Jackson didn't show any weakness either, immediately raising his sharp blade to block. Just then, footsteps approached. Both of them looked at the person and immediately froze. Incred stepped forward, blocking the space between the two of them. This squad leader position the unit he managed was the unit that no one in the barracks wanted to be associated with. Incred raised a hand to block Jem's axe. "What's the matter with you two?" he said in a deep voice. "Captain, he keeps looking for trouble, so I can't hold back anymore." Jackson turned away. "You should thank the squad leader. If it weren't for him, you'd be dead for sure, you know." James glanced over. "All right, talk is cheap. Who knows who would have died first?" Incred thought to himself. Even though they're always fighting like that, they are both capable warriors on the battlefield. I just hope they can get along to help each other in this brutal war. Going on this scouting mission would be dangerous, but he completely understood his own capabilities. Incred thought to himself, the necessary thing now is to train even harder. He silently observed the scout team that would be moving to the front lines to gather information, so being cautious and prepared for everything was essential. Someone spoke up. "Hey, new recruit, aren't you going to move faster?" The scout team leader Andrew pointed a finger. "Even if you were a squad leader before in this scout team, you're just a new recruit. Here I am, the commander. Whatever I say, you have to listen and follow, understand." Behind him, someone laughed loudly. "What could someone like him possibly do, Captain? Forget him. Let's pretend he's not here. That guy, I think I'm not going to do anything and we'll just die early. Look how clueless he looks." He smirked. "Of course, when we fight, I'll keep an eye on you a little. Otherwise, you'll be dead before you know it. I know you were the squad leader of the 4th squad. That squad is full of difficult people. If you led them, I guess someone must have considered you for that position, huh?" Then Andrew said loudly, "All right, enough talk. Listen up. If we encounter the enemy, be careful. First, just take them all down, and then we'll talk." "Understood." Incred felt dissatisfied. This is so hard to understand. What kind of scout team yells so loud? The captain's temperament is as childish as a kid. I don't know if this scout team, can even survive the first battle. Suddenly, a shout rang out. "There are footprints, Captain." He sat down to observe. "Looks like these are just antelope tracks, Andrew." He turned back, his hand clenching. "All right, follow these tracks. We'll have a barbecue tonight." He thought to himself, but antelopes travel in herds of 30. How could there be so few footprints here? They have no idea what they're talking about. Ellie suddenly spoke up. "Antelope? What the hell are you talking about? These are prints from a different species, same family, but they look completely different." Turning toward Incred, Annie gave a friendly smile. "You're new, so don't mind the captain too much. He's a bit childish. Annie is a former hunter, so he has the skills and experience for jobs like this. He says things I can learn a lot from, things that are genuinely useful for Incred to help you survive this war. He let me know that out on the savannah like this, there are many paths used only by animals. I'll tell you more about these things tomorrow." As night fell, a loud voice rang out. "Damn it all! We spent the whole day chasing after antelopes and didn't get a single thing done." Andrew looked confused. "But those were definitely antelope tracks, right?" He scratched his head in frustration. "Fine, whatever, we're here now. Tomorrow we'll need to scout the situation and report back." The scene cuts to early the next morning. The sky is clear and the scouts march forward at a blistering pace. With the tall grass swaying, someone announced, "We're here." Andrew put his hands on his hips. "This is the spot the recon team needs to investigate. It's called the Green Grass Battlefield." Before the squad lay an incredibly vast field of tall grass. He noted, "We need to be careful as we pass through here to track down Aspen's squad then. I try to capture a few enemies to interrogate and earn some credit." Everyone replied in unison, "Understood." Emily asked, "Are you really just going to walk in there like that?" "The mission is just scouting the perimeter," Incred said calmly, using his hands to part the tall grass. "It's the captain's orders. What else can we do?" And so after that, the group trudged deep into the dangerous, overgrown area. You looked at Andrew, thinking to yourself that moving through this grass, which was as tall as a person, was no simple task. To be honest, I really had to push myself just to get this far. It's so difficult. If you don't do it yourself, you can't understand. But I'm also impressed by the others here. They haven't complained even once. Emily looked around. Looking over there, it doesn't seem like there are any animal tracks, huh? Incred assessed. That might actually be the problem. Emily looked a bit scared. In a place with grass this tall, there should be plenty of herbivores. Doesn't the fact that there aren't any mean there's something wrong? Suddenly, right behind where they had just passed something, a furry appeared silently, feet with sharp claws pressed firmly into the ground. Incred's sharp intuition made him realize something was wrong at that very moment. A shadow of a gray panther of abnormally large size suddenly darted past right in front of them. His keen eyes had managed to catch a glimpse of its dangerous presence. The beast's fierce eyes glowed with a chilling blue, filled with murderous intent. Incred reached out, pushed Andrew's head down hard and shouted a warning, "Everyone get down now!" Immediately after, countless sharp arrows shot out from the grass, piercing through some of the team members. Andrew looked over in horror, sweat pouring down his face. Hidden in the tall grass was an entire crossbow unit. Screams erupted. "It's an ambush!" The scouts scrambled for their weapons, fleeing in panic while shouting for each other to run. In the back, Andrew was easily overpowered by the enemy. Emily was also attacked and killed by them. They were right on his heels. The situation was desperate as Ingrid found himself completely surrounded by enemy forces. With no path left to retreat, Ingrid made a decisive move, bolting away to escape. Suddenly, from far away, came the sound of countless bowstrings being drawn taut. His sharp eyes were now focused with intense precision. Clearly, the sound perception technique he had learned was able to be put to use in this situation. After that, Ingrid just kept running through the dense thicket. By now, he heard ear-splitting noises. Beads of sweat streamed down his face, and he helplessly muttered to himself, "With this much chaotic noise, I'm done for." Everything Ingrid had learned was completely ineffective. All around him, he was targeted by countless arrows. His body was now riddled with bolts. Ingrid's eyes widened, realizing that if he could just tell which direction the enemies were coming from, he could dodge. But there were just too many of them. Back when Andrew had angrily shouted, "What did you say? I'll slit your throat, stop talking nonsense." From whatever direction they came, he could dodge them. But this place was too crowded. Just before that, Andrew had shouted angrily, "What did you say? I'll slit your throat, stop talking nonsense." The captain hadn't listened to a word he said. Now he had to find a way to survive on his own. A shout rang out, "It's an ambush run! Hurry!" Even though he had run in every direction, the enemy was always there to cut him off, but he wouldn't give up. "I'll find another way because I can relive the previous day." In many other loops, arrows flew like bullets directly piercing into him. This time, he was attacked by 20 archers coming from the west and killed shortly after. He tried running north to avoid them, but was blocked and surrounded by a cavalry unit. Ingrid's hands clawed helplessly into the dirt as the enemies yelled, "Find him! He's right around here somewhere." Even though no matter if I run east or west or try to hide, they always sniff me out. Increase thinks to himself these pursuers are all wearing green gear so they can easily blend into this tall grass. His body is covered in wounds. Why are they so heavily guarded? There are way too many troops in this field. I don't get what they're trying to protect out here in these green plains. Increase tries to figure it out by peering through a rare gap in the thick grass ahead. Enemy banners made of straw are standing upright next to their tents. His eyes widen in shock as beads of cold sweat trickle down. Right at that moment, a sharp blade from behind stabs straight through Increase's back. Fresh crimson blood oozes out, soaking the grass. He seethes with resentment, not understanding these aspen bastards. What are they hiding? Flashing back to before they set out, Andrew shouts, "We need to cross these green plains, find the Aspen army, and then to capture a few of them as prisoners to get some intel." He thinks to himself, even though I've died and been reborn so many times now, but I still haven't been able to do a thing. Every time I step into that grass, I know I'm done for. Increase's gaze turns cold. I don't get those bastards. Why is their ambush so massive? What are they trying to hide? I have to survive and uncover the truth, but if there's no way to escape death right now, it's all useless. Annie suddenly asks, "Hey, you got something to say?" Increase doesn't say anything, just contemplates. Everything is going to repeat itself, but I can't just keep dying like this. I need to do something. His thin lips press together. I've made up my mind. Andrew shouts again, "Hey, you rookie, why are you still standing there hiding?" A man named Mark speaks up. "I know you're unhappy with what the captain said, but we're on the same team, just let it go. We need to stick together, right?" Increase shrugs. "Honestly, I can't stand looking at a guy like him being captain." He leans in and whispers, "We're all going to die. Every single one of us. He doesn't know the first thing about reconnaissance. You keep sticking up for him, but it won't change a thing. This mission is doomed to fail." Hearing those blunt words, he is stunned for a second. Increase firmly pushes Mark away and says, "Fine, I'm coming." Andrew grips the hilt of his sword, challenging him. "So are you saying you won't follow orders anymore?" You've got your own strategy. Increase's voice comes out cold as ice. What did you say? Why talk to me like that? In this battle, you need to take charge and you'll survive by making the most of everyone in this recon team. Increase's voice drops lower. From now on, I'm the commander here. Got it? Andrew grits his teeth in pure rage. That bastard. In this group, the recon captain Andrew Annie and that tall knight are the three with the skills to survive the longest through the ambushes that Increase has witnessed. That tall knight, he truly fights bravely against the enemy. However, the problem is he only listens to what the captain says. You could say he's like a knight escorting a noble. Andrew draws his sword. All right, if that's what you want, then come at me and let's see who's stronger. The winner gets the right to lead. Pick up your sword. His eyes stare intently. If this guy were just an ordinary captain, why would he need a bodyguard? Increase observes. Looking at how he holds his sword, he's clearly well trained. But his combat skills are still quite weak. Could he have been raised in a noble family? He recalls that night. But then why would he risk his life like this just to earn some merit? Thoughts race through Increase's head. Maybe his family is in decline, and he needs to do something glorious to restore them. Andrew points his sword directly at him. Your skills look like nothing to me yet. You want to command everyone. You're just an arrogant brat who doesn't know his place. Come here, I'll teach you some manners. All right, he thinks first I need to focus on taking down this idiot. Then we'll see. Andrew continues. What I'm doing is completely different from you, he shouts. Because I have a mission to complete. Increase waves his hand to cut him off. Enough. Bring it on. I only need one move to take you down. Just like that, Andrew's pride is stung, so he crazily lunges at him. Increase thinks he recklessly rushed in, because I provoked him instead of watching his opponent. Clearly, he's underestimated me too much in this fight. Then there can only be one outcome. As Andrew charges at him, his carelessness and arrogance will lead to his defeat. Increase's arm flashes out like lightning to swat that sword away. Increase has knocked his opponent's sword aside using nothing but his bare hand. His entire body stumbles off balance from the momentum. Seizing the opportunity, he delivers a powerful, decisive strike straight into Andrew's body. He beats him to a pulp in the blink of an eye. After that, Andrew is in so much pain that he drops to both knees on the ground. Both Mark and Annie are stunned. One single blow. Unbelievable. Isn't he just a low-level knight? Increase declares, From now on, I will lead this recon team. Does anyone have anything else to say? Annie freezes for a moment after hearing that, then stays silent, not saying another word. Seeing that kind of power, Mark can only bow his head and quietly accept the reality before him. On the ground, Andrew grits his teeth in frustration, but he's in too much pain to even curse properly. Mark closed his eyes and turned away. Pretending as if nothing had just happened, he calculated silently. The first step had gone well. After regrouping, the squad continued deeper into the tall grass. A soldier trailing behind grumbled, "What the hell is that guy thinking?" To break the stifling atmosphere, Chris asked suddenly, "Hey Ellie, what's your dream?" Ellie was stunned by the abrupt question. "Why are you asking that?" He scratched his head shyly. "I've always wanted to live a peaceful life in my village with the girl I love." Chris nodded. "I understand. Well, to have that life, we all have to survive first." He glanced back and asked, "What about you?" The man stammered, "My wife just gave birth." Chris cut him off. "All right, I understand. You need to get back to your child." He turned to the other two and asked, "How about you guys?" They answered one by one. "I want to live a quiet life, running a small business, and I want to return to my family and live as a farmer." Chris spoke sternly. "Andrew, what about you?" He hesitated for a moment before saying, I fulfill my mother's dying wish." Andrew clenched his teeth. "This mission will help me achieve that. I will restore my family's glory." He turned back around. "All right, everyone has their own dreams, but to reach them, you have to survive and make it back." Everyone in the squad looked up at him in unison. All eyes turned toward Chris. He clenched his fist. "I will do everything I can to help you all achieve that." After hearing that affirmation, they all looked stunned. At this moment, everyone followed his lead. There was no motivation. greater than sparking hope in their dreams. At this point, he had achieved exactly what he wanted. Chris pointed. "Hey, Ellie, fire an arrow into that patch of tall grass." Ellie shook his head. "There's nothing there," he commanded. "I said do it. Just follow my lead. Hurry up, shoot." Immediately after the order, a sharp arrow from Ellie's hand tore through the air, streaking straight toward the brush. Chris thought to himself, "Did I miscalculate?" But then, the target was taken out. The enemy scouts witnessing that scene were completely shocked. "Are we being ambushed?" He charged forward immediately and shouted, "Run, keep moving!" Andrew behind him gritted his teeth in anger. "Damn it!" Chris silently assessed, "We've gained a bit of an advantage now. The enemy soldiers didn't expect to be ambushed." He struck a lethal blow, taking down one enemy. A thought flickered through Chris's mind. "We've managed to find them first. And we have the upper hand with the first move." A blood-stained sword was drawn. An enemy soldier screamed in panic. "What the hell is going on? Kill them all." Andrew stabbed an enemy in the throat from behind, taking him down. Chris realized the enemy was caught off guard by the ambush. "We need to use this window to thin their numbers, just as much as possible." Because Andrew was the leader, his bodyguard, the Knight Tokon, had to stay close to provide support. Every powerful swing was frantically unleashed by Andrew. One could say the success rate of this attack would be pretty high now. Chris didn't stop capitalizing on the opportunity to push forward. There were 12 enemies, and now they were down to 8. The surviving Aspen soldiers screamed madly, "We've been ambushed by these bastards. Call for backup. Don't let them get away. They're ambushing us." "How many are there?" The enemy had finally stabilized their position. Feet pounded the ground as they ran quickly. Seeing the situation turning disadvantageous, Chris shouted out, "Everyone!" He gave a decisive order, "Take them down quickly." Thanks to the squad's coordinated efforts, the enemies blocking the path were wiped out in the blink of an eye. In this vast sea of tall grass, it wasn't easy to spot us. The reason they were able to find our squad last time was due to an unexpected interference from nature. A large gray figure appeared. A soldier screamed in shock. "Damn it!" The eyes of the gray leopard at that moment shone brightly like two high-powered headlights. The Aspen soldier yelled, "This is infuriating! Die!" He tried to thrust his spear at the leopard. However, the Frederick soldier was finished off by Andrew charging in. This is the beast. The first time entering this grass, he had encountered it. Now Chris met it again in this spot. It had been hunted by the enemy, fled, and accidentally ran into him. Chris thought, "It seems they couldn't immediately recognize our ambush because they were distracted by this beast. It was because of its interference that my plan succeeded." "I will spare this beast's life," someone in the squad shouted. "Our area is cleared," he replied calmly. "All right, let's move to the next spot immediately." The leopard had returned to normal, no longer fierce. In the first brutal battle, we lost one person. Now, there were only 6 left. Even if this battle were repeated many times, the outcome wouldn't change much for him. However, this time was the first success we've had. Now move to the next location. A soldier was hiding in the bushes watching. As expected, thanks to repeating today, he had predicted where the enemy would ambush them and was able to dodge while making critical decisions for the campaign. If we had continued to move straight ahead, we would have faced nearly 30 enemies waiting with crossbows. We need to take this route quickly to avoid losing any more of our men. We have no choice but to go around them. Still, we spotted a lone enemy soldier on our path. Naturally, the first priority is to take him out. We have to do it fast before he can sound the alarm to his squad. This is the only thing I can do for now. Once we've taken him down, we will move quickly to break through the enemy perimeter here. Andrew has been fighting non-stop. Mark, watching from the side, thinks to himself, "Andrew, he's getting a bit too carried away. This battle is mainly about escaping safely. We can't kill them all in this tall grass. There are just too many of them. Increase orders us to get through this meadow before nightfall." He urges everyone to push forward. Mark turns to him and asks, "Do you even know the exact way or what? The deeper we go, the more dangerous it gets." Increase takes the lead. "It's fine, I know the way. Just follow me." He whispers firmly, "I am the commander here, Everyone just follow my lead. Complaining won't solve anything. Suddenly everyone freezes at the sight before them. Mark abruptly holds his sword to the guy's throat, warning him. This fight has reached a critical point. I hope the path you've chosen is a safe one. He growls. If I sense even a hint that your plan isn't working, I'll end you right here. Do you understand you're the leader? But we aren't just blindly following. Hearing Increase's words, Mark glances over. It's too late to turn back now. We have to keep moving forward, you know that, right? Increase points out that the grass is much thinner here, so they need to move fast. If we stand here arguing, we're just gonna die. Mark sneers. Are we supposed to just do whatever you say and be safe? Increase grabs his hand and says, There's something I need to make clear to everyone. He looks around at the group. Everyone here wants to live. Andrew thinks to himself, That guy? I used to think he was just a useless, incompetent loser. He remembers the old days, how his father was a drunkard who wasted the family's entire fortune while he watched on helpless. But now, it seems that wasn't the case. That determined look in his eyes. Back then, his father had said, Andrew, my son, perhaps our family line ends here. His voice was a mere whisper. But you've grown up now. He breathed his last breaths. As long as you have the determination and the strength of will, you can lead our clan to a new life. Work hard, keep learning so that later on, you can restore our family's honor. Become a clan leader that everyone can trust. That is the mark of someone with vision and excellent leadership. Increase lowers his voice. Trust in me. We will survive and get out of here together. Andrew suddenly stands up, nods and says, All right, I trust you. He declares, Captain Increase, I ask that you lead us to victory. Mark speaks up. But Lord Andrew right now, he cuts him off. That's enough. From now on, the commander of this battle is Increase. Andrew says firmly, We need to follow his instructions. Hearing this, Mark falls silent, unable to say another word. Increase crouches down. Everyone keep low as we move. The grass is much shorter here. Remember to stick close to me and move quietly. Immediately, the entire squad kneels down. He had already calculated the path to escape this field. After failing so many times, now that we've made it this far, we just need to move softly, avoid the enemy and slip away. Of course, one always needs a backup plan. The blades of grass glisten under the sunlight. Feet move silently. Countless spears rise up and poke through the grass. After countless times of life and death, he has found some common patterns in this campaign. Everyone's face in the squad at this moment shows visible tension and anxiety. And here everyone is moving extremely quietly, taking each step with the utmost caution. The rustling sounds from their footsteps are as light as a passing breeze. Only then do we have a chance to escape the enemy encirclement without facing them head-on. Beads of sweat roll down everyone's worried faces. Suddenly, Increase in the lead crouches down in one motion as the entire area suddenly goes silent. Everyone in the squad falls into a state of extreme tension. Everything he has done so far has worked perfectly. We've made it this far, so we need to stay calm. The grass here is short, making us easy to spot. We need to hide and wait until dark for a better chance to escape. Being reckless in previous attempts was the reason for failure. This time, he will learn from those mistakes. Increase observes, It looks like there are a lot of enemy patrols here. Annie says anxiously, Oh God, we walk straight into the enemy's den. Someone covers their face and groans, What rotten luck. Ahead of them, countless tents appear. This is the enemy's encampment. It looks like these people are hiding something here that they don't want anyone to discover. Anyone who enters this green savanna is sure to be killed by them. Suddenly, a violent gust of wind rises up. A flag, made of tattered, blood-stained cloth, flutters in the wind. Surrounded by countless skeletons, it looks like an altar. So their mission now is to investigate this camp. Tattered, blood-stained fabric fluttered in the wind. Surrounding them were countless bones like an altar. Their mission now was to find what was inside this encampment. What could be so important to them? Ingrid said softly. All right, let's go. Only by doing that could they escape from here. Wait a minute, Mark asked, flushed with anger. Are you really planning to set a fire inside the enemy camp? He furrowed his brows and warned. Are you crazy? We are in the middle of an enemy camp. One mistake and we're dead. He suddenly lowered his voice, cutting off Mark's complaints. "Hey, what's your name?" He looked visibly annoyed, his voice becoming curt. "Just call me Mark." Incred didn't bother turning back, his lips curling into a slight smirk as he said, "Mark, I won't accept any objections here." Hearing that, he gritted his teeth in frustration. This guy even at the end. But Andrew quickly interrupted Mark, his tone deadly serious. "Shut it." Mark then ran straight into the small path alongside Incred, caught in his own confusion. Reluctantly, Mark had to follow, thinking to himself, "I know what Andrew meant. I guess I'll just follow the captain's lead." He ran while observing the surrounding terrain, inwardly realizing that now was the time when the clouds obscured the moon. At this moment, he had no choice but to trust the captain's decision. He hoped it would be the right one. The sword in Incred's hand was drawn swiftly, slicing through the fabric of the tent next to them. Mark gritted, his teeth unable to hide his skepticism. "Are you insane, breaking into a tent like that?" But as soon as he stepped inside, he was astonished to realize the tent was empty. The three of them continued to dash through the night, running for their lives. Behind them, Mark started to feel dazed and confused, not understanding what his team was doing. What the hell is this? What's wrong with him? His hurried yet bold demeanor sparked a thought in Mark. He was dashing through the enemy camp as if there was nobody around. Cold sweat ran down Mark's cheek, along with a comment for Incred, "So reckless." He suddenly couldn't believe his eyes glancing around, even though they were running so fast. They hadn't encountered a single enemy. We've almost reached the end of the road, but is this even possible? Where did the enemy go? They suddenly stopped on a small path when the enemy appeared right before their eyes. Incred narrowed his eyes, casting a sharp glance at his two teammates, then ordered them to wait here. He reached up to wipe the sweat from his face. Incred quietly observed every move the enemy made, unable to help, but feel surprised, thinking, "I've infiltrated this place countless times, but this is the first time I've discovered the flag and been able to touch it." Incred recalled the times he had recklessly charged in, only for them to end in failure. The entire enemy force here had gathered around him, aiming to protect the flag. He suddenly spoke to his two teammates, sharing the information he had gathered. To the Aspen soldiers, that flag is a crucial item on the battlefield, and their primary target to protect. On the other side, the flag was being shielded by a dense and stern guard of soldiers. Mark suddenly questioned, what will happen if that flag is burned? He was secretly surprised, thinking the captain already knew that the flag existed there beforehand. How Mark's eyes widened as if he suddenly remembered something. He was suddenly astonished, realizing, is this what the commander was talking about? He was the one who personally decided to choose the captain for the scout team. That means he knew his true ability. At that very moment, Incred spoke up, cutting off Mark's train of thought. The Aspen soldiers will focus on recovering and protecting the flag. Mark's view of him seemed to have changed completely. Our captain, who is always cautious in every move, is now recklessly infiltrating the very heart of the enemy. It's all to complete this secret mission, isn't it? Incred's gaze was resolute as he ordered, "Destroy the flag and then we will escape from here." He turned his head sharply, then lowered his voice to instruct. "From now on, we will split into two teams. One will act as a decoy to draw the enemy's attention. This is a difficult challenge." Before he could, a Finnish Mark suddenly cut in, continuing his sentence. "The other team will burn the flag." Incred was suddenly stunned to see him standing on his side. Mark walked away without looking back while he stood there dazed, thinking, he's been resisting this whole time, but now he's suddenly cooperating like this. That will make things much easier. Incred looked at the backs of his new teammates, feeling a strange sensation in his heart. I've led people into the Aspen encampment a few times before, but this is the first time with so many people. The soldiers quickly signaled each other in silence and began to carry out the plan. He was quiet, the corners of his lips slightly upturned, thinking to himself, today is a beautiful day and I'm feeling pretty good. If things keep going like this, we can do it. The plan began to unfold when a stone hit an enemy soldier in the head. They screamed and then chased after Mark's group. There are intruders! The enemy surged forward in increasing numbers. Catch them! Incred also quickly ran toward the flaming torch. We must succeed in this mission. You reach out and grip the tool that will help you finish the plan. Increase holds the torch in his hand, his eyes filled with unwavering determination to see this through to the end. It was either success tomorrow when the loop reset, or right then and there. Suddenly, Meat lunged forward, raising his weapon high, ready to strike you with a powerful blow. The torch in Increase's hand was knocked away. In his shock, a bead of cold sweat trickled down his cheek. His eyes widened in disbelief. When did he even get this close without me noticing? Increase's body tensed up as he faced the brutal Meat. He stared at the guy, thinking to himself, "This is a hell of a strong enemy. I've never seen anyone like this before." Increase's eyes went wide, completely overwhelmed by the intense aura. I've never seen anyone like him. In his mind, he kept wondering, where the hell did this guy even come from? Mitt suddenly growled, "You little rats." Increase bowed his head, a slight smirk playing on his lips as he said something cryptic. It's too late. Meat stood frozen, his eyes filled with confusion, as if he couldn't process what was happening. At that exact moment, a flame suddenly erupted in the darkness, making Increase's words seem even clearer. The enemy soldiers scattered, screaming at the top of their lungs, "Fire! The tents are on fire!" They pointed at his comrades, screaming that there were many intruders, and grabbed him right then. Having regained his composure, he immediately shouted orders to the panicking soldiers to put out the fire, while secretly feeling smug that Mark had acted as bait to distract them, while Andrew started the fire. Lo ran according to plan, his eyes wide open. In his mind, there was only one thought. Now was the time to escape, taking advantage of the moment he wasn't paying attention. Increase moved quickly, shifting his body. He raised his sword, preparing to thrust it straight at Meat, carefully focusing all his power from his legs into the strike. In Increase's eyes, it was as if only the man remained. He stomped on the ground, stepped forward, and lunged his entire body ahead. His eyes lit up as he spotted an opening. Swift as lightning, he charged straight at Meat. "Got you!" The sword tip was just inches away, closing in on his head, his weak spot. Suddenly, Meat dodged away, evading the sharp blade. Increase's eyes widened in disbelief at what he was seeing. The man had completely escaped the lethal strike he had just unleashed. Carried by momentum, Increase continued to run forward, his pupils contracting with astonishment that Meat could react so quickly. The man swung his sword into his stomach, causing a stream of red fluid to pour out. Increase stopped clutching his wound, panting and thinking to himself that the strike had been nearly perfect. He fearfully glanced at the man. Meat's eyes were bloodshot, filled with rage, and he complained, "How annoying." Increase's body began to sway, realizing an undeniable truth: he couldn't take him down with his current abilities. "I will never be able to take him down," he thought in disappointment, considering the long journey that filled with hardships he had endured. Increase felt a wave of regret, thinking of crossing the defense lines at the Reed battlefield, his palms gripping his sword tightly, having narrowly avoided death countless times from ambushes. Increase's eyes suddenly widened. "I finally thought I could make it through today on this mission, but you..." He stared at the man wielding the sword, unwilling to give up. Preparing to finish himself off, he thought, "Are you truly a wall I cannot break?" Increase reached out to touch the wound, which was now continuously bleeding red fluid. "If I keep fighting him, I'll die." Increase struggled, trying to stand upright while holding his sword. "And I'll have to lead the squad all over again, crossing the battlefield and repeating this endless day. After experiencing so many deaths, I cannot fail." Mitt, noticing his death-defying attitude, furrowed his brows, his face extremely grim, and asked, "Are you smiling?" Increase didn't answer. The thoughts in his heart gave him the strength to fight. "I'll kill you!" Mitt aggressively charged forward with his sword full of arrogance. "I'll turn you into fresh meat for the beasts." He took a defensive stance, the resolve in his eyes, fueling the sword. Dewa in Increase's hand as he swung it once more. "I will break this wall." Increase finally managed to block the sword Meat brought down. He put all his power into a counterattack, but it didn't seem to shake the man at all. He gasped, eyes wide, seeing how easily Meat blocked his strike. He blocked his attack just like that. The man then raised his arm high, preparing to strike with his sword, but Increase nimbly moved his legs to dodge the blow. Mitt continued to swing his sword, leaving Increase filled with doubt. How did he block that in that position? In a moment of distraction, the blade came towards his head. Incris immediately used his own sword to block that powerful blow. Sweat began to pour down his face like a waterfall, clearly revealing the tension in his eyes. His movements are too complex. Incris's pupils began to tremble, a feeling of despair washing over his entire body. I don't have a single chance to counterattack. Incris was sent flying backward, clearly feeling the gap in strength between them. The difference in rank was all too obvious. The sword in his hand quickly followed his body's motion, striking back toward the man. Meat bowed his head, paying no mind to the sword tearing through the wind toward him. But in the split second before impact, the man managed to use his hand to deflect the sword. He stared eyes wide. You used your hand to deflect that blade. Meat turned, swinging his sword with overwhelming force, and lunged straight at him. The blade carrying a cold, murderous intent came for him again. The panic-stricken screams of the crowd pierced through the flames. The fire is spreading. The sharp blade was just inches away from him. Just then, the voices of the crowd made the man's hand pause. Someone spilled the oil. The flag pole caught fire, accompanied by the helpless cries of the soldiers. The fire was burning near the flagpole. His subordinate behind him quickly shouted to Meat. The commander's face contorted with agitation. Don't you know what's important right now? The man hesitated, glancing at Incris. This guy, it seemed he wasn't easily swayed, even while at a disadvantage. He breathed heavily, but raised his sword before him, prepared to block every incoming attack. The man suddenly growled, You, Before leaving, Mitt looked at him with icy eyes and warned, Just wait for next time. Then he turned and walked away without bothering to look back. Incris remained frozen, unable to believe he had chosen to leave. Is he retreating from this fight just like that? Ignoring me, huh? Watching Meat's back, he pondered. So he isn't actually a wall I need to overcome. Incris gradually let go of his inner struggle. Even if it isn't a wall for me to overcome today, we will surely meet again in the future. His hand tightened around the hilt of his sword, determined. Regardless for now, the day is at an end. Incris's eyes went wide, wanting to charge at him, but the battle had come to a temporary close. Just then, Andrew rushed over, shouting, Commander! He frowned urgently, calling, We have to leave now. Andrew continuously urged him, Commander, let's go. Incris's eyes were still fixed on Mitt's back. The man suddenly shot him a terrifying glance. Seeing that, he suddenly froze. The sword in Incris's hand was finally sheathed. He loudly ordered his army, Fall back, retreat. Therefore, the enemy was still trying to put out the fire at the flagpole, with screams echoing everywhere, while Incris's army was fleeing. Put out the fire, he quickly observed the army. With a sense of relief, they realized they hadn't lost anyone. All 5 team members were safe. Suddenly, the mom panicked and screamed, Is this enough? Surely the pursuit team won't come after us, right? Ingrid replied, her voice trembling with uncertainty. I hope not. Annie suddenly winced in pain, shivering as she stopped. The enemy was already closing in from behind. Catch those intruders. Don't let them escape alive. At that very moment, Ingrid's group surged forward to protect Annie. She quickly clashed with the soldiers while Mark fought fiercely, driving his sword straight into them. Andrew was just as relentless, taking down anyone who got close. Ingrid quickly turned back to urge the others. Annie, don't hesitate. Keep running. Exhausted as she was, she forced herself to keep going. If we make it to the Fox Meadow settlement, we'll be near our own territory, she said. The enemy's pursuit team won't follow us there, right? One of the soldiers asked in a panic. But then won't it be hard for us to get out of here? Suddenly, Emily spoke up firmly. I know a safe place. It's a path used by hunters. Ingrid didn't hesitate for a second, replying, I trust you. Lead the way. After some time, running for their lives, Ingrid's group finally managed to escape. After a while, they could no longer hear the enemy's footsteps chasing them. They hurried on, clothes covered in dirt, not daring to stop for even a moment. Finally, the sun began to rise. Reflecting on their journey, Ingrid thought to herself, thanks to Andrew, Val, and Mark fighting so well, we were able to take out a few of them during the retreat without much trouble. She remembered with gratitude. If it hadn't been for Annie, Leading the way, we wouldn't have been able to evade the enemy so easily. We've come this far. 'Tas because everyone in the team worked together. As the sun started to peek over the horizon, a tired Ingrid raised her hand to shade her eyes, squinting at the intense, blinding light. The sun's rays beat down on them. Exhausted after the scouting mission and the raid on the enemy camp, they quickly rushed back to their own base. The group in the camp saw Ingrid's team and asked in shock, "What on earth happened to you guys?" Emily, with a blackened, weary face, groaned. "I think I'm about to pass out." A sudden voice called out, "Hey, Ingrid!" She kept her eyes shut, panting in exhaustion. "I survived. I made it through another loop today." She looked up at the sunlight, feeling a secret joy, to witness another early dawn. Scene change. Back at the enemy camp, Gray frowned in disappointment. "That flag in the camp has been burned." The mysterious man in black lowered his voice. "We'll have to prepare again." He smirked sarcastically. "I didn't think the famous Hound unit would just be a burden in this battle." Gray clenched his fists, staring into the distance, thinking, "I absolutely cannot understand it." Just a few of them following the tracks left by elite Hound soldiers in the tall grass. And they succeeded. They crossed the field where many soldiers were lying in ambush, set fire to the flag, and escaped. He belonged to an organization called the Hounds, an elite squad with independent authority within the Aspen Army. The origin of the name was derived from the Aspen Hounds, famous for their gray fur and persistent nature. They were known for pursuing their targets relentlessly, whether in love or war. That was the origin of the team, and that was why this special unit was called the Hounds, also known as those who love recklessly. In battle, they were incredibly fierce. He didn't a turnaround, just asked the person behind him. Was he really that strong in the fight? Gray called the commander's name, Mid Harrison. Mid reported honestly, "If it wasn't for someone complaining and rushing to put out the fire to save the flags, then I would have finished him off." Gray looked grim and sighed. How lucky he is. Finally, his voice grew menacing. "But the next time I meet him, he won't be that lucky again." Scene change. Back at Ingrid's camp, she was wrapping her hand in bandages, thinking about what was bothering her. She hadn't been able to break through that wall. After facing him, she always felt a desire to fight, even if that battle. It was dangerous. Even though they weren't in the same place, she and Mid shared the same thought. One day, they both muttered with surging determination, "Next time I will definitely catch him and kill him." A thought full of confidence appeared in Ingrid's mind. "You will surely be defeated by my hand, Jean." Lying on a wooden bed in his tent, Zen was bored playing with his axe. "I'm so bored I could die. It's almost time for the scout team to return." "But why is there no news yet?" Zen caught the axe as it fell from above, landing perfectly in his hand. He stopped playing with the weapon, set it down, and let out a sigh. Suddenly, an unpleasant thought crossed his mind, making Zen frown. Did he kick the bucket? Zen pondered it, but decided to dismiss the thought. Lately, he seems to have improved a bit, but he's still a rookie at scouting. So if he died in battle, it wouldn't be all that surprising. Strange enough, I've grown to like that attitude of his. Finally, after his wandering thoughts came to an end, Zen resigned himself to his initial hypothesis. Well, if he's dead, then so be it. Ragnar, in the bed across the room, had just woken up from a good sleep. He stretched and let out a refreshing yawn, only to realize someone was muttering to themselves. Ragnar slowly regained his senses and glanced toward the sound. He saw Jem leaning back, hugging his beloved axe. They were both looking at each other. Ragnar found it annoying and blurted out a challenge. "What are you looking at?" Jem didn't even bother answering the brat. He silently flipped Ragnar the middle finger as his response. Ragnar wasn't about to let it slide. Instead of using his hand, he leaned back and stuck out his middle toe to return Jem's gesture. Seeing the kid dare to talk back like that, Jem scoffed and threatened him. "Hey," as he lifted the axe in his hand to scare Ragnar. "Do you want me to kill you?" Ragnar didn't care about the guy trying to intimidate him and cursed, "Crazy bastard," while already half drawing his dagger from its sheath. Once their argument ended, inside a tent, Battalion Commander Eo Jang sat on her chair and spoke sternly to Incris. "You ambushed the enemy, infiltrated their base, and set their camp on fire, didn't you?" she asked Incris. Standing at attention, he slowly replied to the commander. It was all a split-second decision, and I only managed to pull it off because I got lucky. However, Yeojang didn't seem satisfied when she heard that news. Lucky, you say? She countered. He remained silent, not offering any further explanation, just staring intently at Yeojang. The tense atmosphere didn't last long before Yeojang spoke up. I understand. Go back and get some rest for your wounds, Incris. Hearing that, he bowed to show his respect and retreated from the tent. After he had left, Yeojang quietly pondered what Incris had done. She had thought he would handle everything smoothly like before. In this camp, you really shouldn't hope for too much only to be disappointed. She thought to herself, feeling a bit let down by the actions of someone she trusted. Yeojang watched Incris's retreating figure, wondering about his unusual behavior. What the hell is wrong with him? After Incris left Yeojang's room, he began his own introspection. What the hell was that commander thinking? I don't know. Just walking straight into an enemy camp and burning it down, is that supposed to be simple? He criticized Yeojang's logic. Just then, Andrew walked up and called for Incris, cutting off his thoughts. Sabori, squad leader Incris. Suddenly standing in the middle of the yard under everyone's gaze, he bowed and said loudly, I was a complete failure earlier. I apologize to you. It's thanks to you that I'm still alive today. Saying that, he looked up and made a shocking request, almost forcing Incris to agree. Next time, can we be in the same squad again? Incris wasn't rattled by his actions. He waved his hand and bluntly replied to Andrew, who was pretending to be sincere. If we fight on the same front line, then sure. He then slowly walked away, leaving many people stunned, not understanding what had just happened between the squad leader and Andrew. Andrew looked at Incris's calm demeanor and was extremely angry that he hadn't been able to humiliate him in front of the crowd. Andrew's hand instinctively rested on the sword at his hip, gripping the hilt tightly while not knowing if he was angry or moved. Finally, facing Incris's back, he bowed to show his respect. Immediately, everyone in the squad followed Andrew's lead. Bowing respectfully to Incris, he walked on his feet, moving forward mindlessly as he went. Incris was thinking about what Andrew said and the recent battle. They thank me because thanks to me they are still alive today. Even though he only saved those 4 people, but he hesitated. A stream of thoughts flowed through his mind, making Incris wonder if that was really the best he could do. Incris bowed his head slightly, his steps becoming more hurried. He thought about the past and still felt very remorseful. Andrew's thank you cut into his pain. In the end, I still lost 2 team members on the battlefield. If only I were a little stronger, I could have saved them too. Finishing his train of thought, Incris reached a conclusion and a word of encouragement for himself. Today I surpassed my limits by living through the present time and time again. So from now on I won't fight in vain anymore. He poured all his heart into it, telling himself it was time to pursue the image of the knight he wanted to become. Survive today, that is what I am aiming for. And to ensure today didn't repeat itself, he firmly set a goal for his life. I must become even stronger. Suddenly, from a distance, someone shouted an announcement. Those lunatics are fighting again. The brawl in the distance successfully drew Incris's attention. It turned out to be Ragnar and Jem fighting each other. Jem fought with increasing fervor. His face clearly showed the confidence that he would defeat that brat. Ragnar didn't show any emotion. He focused on every move, determined to take down that old man. Incris stood outside the match, quietly observing both of them, especially their expressions. Those expressions, I have never seen them appear on their faces before, he silently concluded to himself. Incris wasn't in a hurry to intervene. He seriously analyzed everything, even though it was just minor changes. I've fought my teammates countless times, but I've never once seen that expression. Eye on their faces when they face me. A soldier watching the match exclaimed, Is he even human? Watching him fight, he's a monster. What kind of human is that? On the arena floor, Ragnar and Jem each wielded their favorite weapons, repeatedly lunging at each other, then separating. Every move looked like they really wanted to send the other to the afterlife. Incris observed from start to finish, feeling a bit regretful about his own decision. I shouldn't have been so anxious to fix my mistakes from the beginning. He gripped his sword hilt quietly, drawing the blade from his hip, firmly resolving, So from now on, I will complete every goal I've set and improve." He slowly looked up at Ragnar and Jem, mapping out his first steps. "That expression makes them reveal it when they face me." The match was heating up when suddenly a sword cut in, breaking the combat stance of both. Ragnar stopped the fight. He looked to see who dared to stop him. He was extremely surprised to see Incris. "Squad leader," he called out. Incris looked sternly at Jem and Ragnar on the arena floor, were calmly waiting for an explanation. Jem, quick-tongued and snarky, jabbed at Incris. "If you were coming, you should have just told me. Why are you sneaking around like a cat and spying on me, huh?" The two of them stopped their spar instantly. Jem fired off, fuming at Incris. "Do you think this is fun? If you're not planning on taking this seriously, then just get out." Ragnar calmly checked on Incris. "Are you hurt anywhere?" Incris replied casually. "Just a few scrapes." Ragnar didn't blame his teammate, getting straight to the point. "Enough with that, Jem, just now when you blocked Ragnar's attack." Before Incris could finish his sentence, Jem cut him off. "This guy is starting up again. If you're back now, go wash up and get some rest." Incris didn't rush off. He turned to look at Ragnar, detached. "Ragnar, that attack just now." Ragnar didn't answer his question, only staring at him strangely. What is he doing now? Being stared at felt weird. Incris asked, "What's wrong?" Ragnar didn't say anything quickly, turning away to avoid the gaze. "Nothing, it's nothing." But Incris asked, loudly from behind, "It feels like you have something you want to say." Noticing Ragnar's attitude, he didn't push it further, thinking to himself, "Fine, I'll just wait until whenever you're ready to talk." Dusk fell. The soldiers at the camp worked together to haul bags of grain, preparing everything near the attack site to get ready for the enemy's ambush. Incris, the commander, had mobilized all the troops closer to the battlefield upon discovering the enemy's ambush. During the relocation, the soldiers' wounds had healed up very quickly, and they seized the chance to train getting ready for the fight. Incris had just changed his shirt and stepped out of his tent when he ran into Chris, who was sitting outside enjoying a snack. The kid asked, "Incris training again? We're marching tomorrow, you know." Chris worried for him. "Go get some rest, okay?" Incris didn't answer, only saying, "Just a little longer and then we'll head back." Ragnar and Jem were sitting together, eating as if nothing had happened that morning. Jem shoveled food into his mouth and muttered, "If he keeps going like this without improving, we're all going to die." Ragnar didn't say a word, silent, as if in agreement with Jem. Time passed. The sun climbed high, lighting up the sky over the camp, bringing a beautiful day with it. Ragnar lay on his cot, sleeping soundly. Still groggy, he slowly opened his eyes. Ragnar sat up and looked around, seeing no one. He thought to himself, "The squad leader is off training again, I bet." Ragnar stretched, stepped off the bed ready for the day's activities. He walked over to his large blade, bent down and grabbed the hilt. Ragnar slowly pulled the blade from where it lay, muttering, "The kid's got some real swordsmanship." After that, Ragnar sluggishly dragged his blade out of the tent, rubbing his hair. "Getting stronger isn't that hard. I already saw the path to becoming a knight before." He stepped out of the tent. The sunlight hit Ragnar's face, making him squint. He let out a huge yawn, but he was bored. He kicked those initial thoughts away with a conclusion. Ragnar didn't have Incris's endless energy. He felt miserable. What's the point of becoming a knight if I don't even want to? Do I really have to force myself to become a knight? Gradually, Ragnar began to seriously contemplate his life. I've lost my sense of self, and I don't have a goal to strive for anymore. So he just stopped. After thinking for a moment, he wandered aimlessly and found the familiar figure of his teammate Incris. Unlike Ragnar's mood, Incris was full of energy and determination. In the middle of his training, suddenly Incris's arm seized up, making it impossible to move. His sword clattered onto the ground. He collapsed, clutching his arm in pain. Ragnar, having watched every swing of Incris's blade from behind, didn't approach the injured leader. He just quietly let out a remark, pointing out the core issue. The commander learned the wrong style from the start. Back when I first picked up a sword, I mastered the basics first. Ragnar leaned against a nearby tent pole, thinking. Ragnar stood there watching Incris from afar. because he had picked up so many tricks and bad habits. No matter how much he trains, he just won't get any stronger. However, Ragnar's hand tightened around his sword hilt. He really wanted to walk over and ask Incris, but in the end, Ragnar stayed still, watching Incris's determined eyes from a distance. Ragnar wondered why he pushed himself so hard, to sacrifice himself so much. Ragnar stared at the sweaty back of the young commander, a lingering sense of wonder rising in his chest. Finally, Ragnar walked closer, his voice low as he pressed him. Incris, why do you push yourself to the breaking point like this? Incris looked up, his eyes bright with resolve, answering, because I want to become stronger. Ragnar looked him straight in the eyes. He continued to press him until the end. And once you're stronger, what are you going to do? Incris answered without a moment's hesitation. I'm going to become a knight. Ragnar dropped a reality check. A knight is just someone who's good at fighting, right? So what's the point of becoming one then? Incris's face revealed absolute belief. He declared loudly, to me, becoming a knight means doing what I believe is right. He continued, his voice echoing across the training grounds. It's for the poor and the sick, it's for honor. Incris picked up his shining sword. It's about swinging this blade for the person I love. That's what my dream of becoming a knight means to me. Ragnar said nothing to Incris's answer. He silently repeated those words to himself. Belief and honor. Ragnar lowered his weapon. It felt like a massive knot in his heart had finally unraveled. So that's what it is. In the end, strength is just a tool after all. Ragnar kept turning those thoughts over in his mind. Ingrid's answer echoed in his head. What does it mean to be a knight? What does a sword truly mean? What am I actually searching for? Ragnar rested his blade on his shoulder and walked slowly out to the training grounds. He answered himself, I won't know until I walk that path myself. Ragnar acknowledged it. He looked at Ingrid and spoke up to the squad leader. Hearing his name, Ingrid stopped and looked up at Ragnar. Ragnar asked Ingrid a question, as if silently agreeing with Ingrid's ideals. Do you want to learn how to become a knight? Ingrid stood tall and didn't hesitate to reply. Ragnar saw how incredibly determined Ingrid was to become a knight, and with that he had nothing left to ask. He let out a soft sigh, as if surrendering to the captain's sheer willpower. Even so, he didn't forget to tease him. I think I spoke too soon. This is going to be a real pain. He sighed softly, but seeing the determination in the other man's eyes, Ragnar felt intrigued. After all, Ragnar hesitated, looking at Ingrid's resolve, looking into those eyes. Seems interesting, Ragnar mused. He began to get serious, setting his terms in a tone that allowed for no compromise. Then what about that beast heart? And the piercing technique you learned from those manji? What will become of them, beast heart? Ingrid tried to recall it. Ragnar nodded, signaling that Ingrid had guessed correctly. That and the piercing technique, Ragnar continued his instruction. Other than those two, throw everything else away. Ingrid raised an eyebrow, shocked, and pressed him. Even the Valen swordsmanship of the mercenaries. But Ragnar immediately and firmly emphasized, that especially has to go. He propped his blade against the ground and explained, if you don't drop it when you learn new sword techniques, you'll unconsciously rely on your old tricks. If that's the case, you might as well stay exactly as you are. Ragnar rested his chin on his sword and offered two options. Take your pick. Throw it all away and start from scratch. Or settle for where you are now. Ingrid replied without a moment's hesitation. I will start from scratch. Hearing Ingrid's answer, Ragnar looked up, slightly surprised by the young commander's decisiveness. So he asked again. Really? Ingrid didn't answer directly, but instead asked, so what should I do first? Ragnar stared at him and thought to himself, this guy is seriously not normal. Ragnar wasn't in a hurry. He rested his hand on his sword as a prop to stand comfortably and explained slowly, a squad leader is naturally strong. There's no need to use light weapons. A longsword would be better. Why don't you trade with me? Ragnar suggested. Give me your sword, that's fine, right? Ingrid was a bit worried and asked. Ragnar calmly handed over his old sword and instructed, it's fine. It was just something I picked up anyway. Right hand on the longsword, left hand behind. Ingrid took the sword and gripped it tightly. Seeing him clench the longsword, Ragnar found it strange. He frowned and asked, Why are you gripping it so tightly? Ingrid replied blankly. I'm afraid I'll drop it. Who taught you that? Ingrid reluctantly blurted out the name Gem. Hearing the name of his rival Ragna felt helpless. That useless monkey. Ragna ordered in a serious voice. Keep your stance. From a distance, he gained momentum and lunged, raising his sword high. Ragna used his strength to bring the sword down accurately onto Ingrid's, creating a loud clang. After that strike, Ingrid's hands were shaking because they couldn't handle the force. He breathed heavily, staring at the longsword. Ingrid didn't understand Ragna's actions and felt a bit irritated. What are you doing that hurts? Ragna replied casually, without a shred of leniency. Of course it does. He loudly criticized the basic mistake. If you're stiff as a log, you'll just break. You're like a dry twig, something like that. Ingrid grumbled, annoyed by the weird analogy. This guy only says ridiculous things. What kind of weird comparison is that? But instead of taking offense, Ingrid asked for clarification. You mean my hands are as stiff as a log? Ragna explained in detail. If you don't want to break, you have to know how to bend with the sword's momentum. You have to be more flexible. The sky was blue and sunny, shining brightly through the fluffy white clouds, signaling that it was noon at the training ground. The image of the two tall men still diligently practicing remained. Ragna's voice echoed. Pay attention to your center of gravity. Every one of Ingrid's steps was monitored by Ragna. Where is that foot going? The clinking sound of metal on metal rang out, followed by the sound of instructions. Are you trying to break your neck with all that tension? Under Ragna's strict guidance, Ingrid had become exhausted. Ragna shouted angrily when he saw the sloppy practice lines. What kind of flailing was that? Lost in training until the sun was well past its peak, the sound of sword clashes finally stopped. Ragna still had energy. He watched Ingrid sitting on the ground, panting from exhaustion. After the entrance assessment training, Ragna rested his chin on his hand, weary of this clumsiness. I didn't expect him to be this incompetent. He doesn't even know the most basic things about swordsmanship. He seriously thought about changing his teaching method. Teaching like this probably won't work. Ingrid braced himself to stand up, hiding his weakness. His body was drenched in sweat, dripping from the middle of his forehead to the ground. Ingrid refused to lose. He reached for the longsword, lifted it, and faced Ragna. Ingrid didn't show his weakness. Ragna watched him struggle, feeling extremely satisfied. He was waiting to see just how great this guy's willpower really was. Ingrid stood up straight. He adjusted his stance, regained his composure, and continued the training session. Let's go again, Ingrid said. However, Ragna understood his situation. He didn't force Ingrid. He lowered his sword and sighed, laying out a training plan for Ingrid. He told him start by walking. Jen appeared from somewhere, as if he had been searching for the two of them for a long time. He stood watching them with a sarcastic expression. Haven't seen you all day. Jen with an expressionless face. But his mouth didn't say anything nice. Turns out you're hiding here playing kids' games. He glared fiercely at Ragna, brandishing his axe at him. Is this bastard bullying the squad leader? Do you want me to teach him a lesson on your behalf? Slice his tendons right now. Increase raised his hand, signaling a halt. Looking back, he noticed the immaculate armor on his companion and asked, What's going on? Why are you so dressed up today? Zem immediately dropped his casual demeanor. In a grave, heavy voice, he announced an emergency gathering for the entire camp inside the tent. Christ, get your armor on quickly. The enemy is closing in. Alden was also ready. Jackson was the quietest of them all. He said nothing, just silently equipped his weapons, prepared for battle. From high above, Eozung looked down at the massive approaching army. Below, the soldiers were gathering under the clear blue sky, a hub for the elite and powerful. In the ranks of the troops, Ragnar stood with stern authority. His face betrayed deep, worried contemplation. And I'm teaching him swordsmanship right now, of all times. Switching to new sword techniques mid-battle, he's bound to be clumsy. Ragnar was anxious. Because of this, he might lose his life today. His eyes were fixed on the young squad leader standing at the very front. I've decided to protect him. I'll stick close to him today. Increase gritted his teeth in regret at having to pause the training. Damn it, I still wanted to keep learning more swordsmanship, but I guess it's not meant to be. The enemy, what are they doing? He rushed to the edge of the barricade, eyes narrowing as he scanned the enemy's formations. He whispered to himself, "A strange formation." From the hazy front lines in the distance, Dawa, the one who ended Increase's life in the previous timeline, stepped forward. The man's voice was chilling, dripping with lethal intent. He whispered, "This is the end for you all." The mist, thick and unnatural, engulfed the soldiers. Yeozang watched the strange, dense fog. Sensing something foul, she muttered, "Magic." Gradually, the mist rolled over Increase's unit, obscuring the soldiers' vision. Increase was unsettled by the sudden abnormal shift in weather. Fog just like that. Watching the thick white smoke descend abruptly, blotting out the sun and blanketing the entire battlefield, he was stunned. Even those standing right in front of him were invisible. The soldiers began to lose their bearings in the blinding space. Someone screamed in terror, "What is this? Why is there suddenly fog? I can't see anything." The crowd grew rowdy and chaotic. Suddenly, a strange, piercing wind ripped through the white screen. A panicked soldier asked the person next to him, "What was that? Did you hear that just now?" The crowd fell into chaos, pushing and shoving weapons, clashing against one another. "What is it? What's that noise? What the hell is happening right in front of us?" A sharp whistling sound tore through the air right next to his ear. Increase immediately sensed the danger from above. "Arrows!" he shouted deep into the murky mist. Countless arrows rained down on the disoriented troops. Because their vision was so limited, a large number of soldiers were struck and fell, causing the Fairy Creek army to suffer heavy losses. From atop the cliff, Yeozang struggled to dodge the arrows while trying to deduce the origin of the fog. "This isn't natural mist. It's a surprise tactic from the enemy," she shouted. Directing the soldiers, she commanded, "Get down. Raise your shields. We've been tricked." Deep within the white smoke, the mage Frederick watched the chaos of the allied forces, grinning triumphantly. "Do you have any idea how hard I worked to complete this spell? I had to collect blood from countless beasts, water from the purest lake, and I even had to cast rain-calling spells repeatedly." He laughed maniacally, overflowing with arrogance. "When the spell is cast, the thick mist blinds everyone. But as long as I stand under the flag, the medium of the spell, I can see everything clearly. At that point, our army will strike the enemy with ease." Finally, he declared, "I call it the fog of death." From behind, Might watched the mage going mad over his creation. He remarked, "You seem quite happy." The mage replied contentedly, "Of course, I had to risk my life to keep that flag from burning just to cast this spell." He excitedly explained, "If it weren't for that bastard burning the camp, things wouldn't have been this difficult." Might said nothing, just stared toward the camp and the terrified soldiers. His face twisted with malice, hinting at Increase. "That guy, he's going to die by my hand in this battle." In the thick smoke, sudden danger loomed as arrows flew in from above with a wind-tearing speed. Ragnar's voice boomed from behind, warning, "Increase, squad leader, don't move." He was startled to hear the voice right beside him. "Huh, Ragnar is right behind me." Looking at the chaotic scene and the shrouding mist, a figure suddenly appeared beside him. "Is this magic witch bastard?" It was Jem's voice. Increase felt a flicker of relief, but realized the gravity of the situation immediately. He was right in front of him, but the mist made it impossible to see. This put the whole squad at a disadvantage. "We can't attack at full strength." Suddenly, an arrow whistled down and lodged right next to Increase, making him recoil. The battle in the white void. Drained Increase's stamina rapidly. His breathing grew labored. "I'm using up too much energy." He realized the problem with clear-headed focus, but despair welled up as his legs refused to obey his mind. Increase cursed. "Damn it, my legs are freezing up. I haven't even had a chance to use the methods Ragnar taught me." Looking at himself, he realized the massive gap between him and a genius. "I don't think I can master everything." The warnings from his comrade echoed in his ears. "Even if you learn from me, you'll soon revert to your old habits. Until you master these new sword techniques, don't engage in battle just yet." Ragnar had looked him straight in the eyes, stating firmly, "But if you insist on staying on the battlefield to fight, You will die increase. He closed his eyes, facing his cruel fate. That's right. I know exactly what awaits me ahead, death. With the last of his strength, Increase didn't hesitate. He stepped straight into the fog. Ragnar, right behind Increase, warned, "Squad leader, come back, I found an exit." Increase walked forward with conviction, his resolve far exceeding that of an ordinary person. He said, "If I can't succeed in one go." With that, Increase bolted into the mist, leaving Ragnar behind, screaming in horror as he saw the commander rush headlong into danger. "Squad leader, are you out of your mind?" Not long after he started running, an enemy soldier appeared out of nowhere, lunging forward with a spear that pierced straight through Inchrist. A sharp, agonizing pain tore through his body. As the spear drove through him, piercing his throat, he thought to himself amidst the agony, though it didn't really matter anymore. His consciousness was fading fast. Yet deep down, he felt a strange sense of relief. With this death, I'll get to learn swordsmanship from Ragnar again. The soldier Fredrik pulled his weapon out and spat with utter contempt. "Die, you psycho!" Time reset to the days they spent training on the grounds. This time, Inchrist was sharper, and he looked at Ragnar, asking offhandedly why he kept failing. "You still don't get it." Inchrist sat on the ground, secretly thinking that Ragnar wasn't exactly a great teacher. He understood Ragnar's mindset from the perspective of a genius. His explanations were incredibly vague and hard to grasp. Ragnar, calm as ever, listened to Inchrist's question and mused, "I understand it, but my body just doesn't keep up." He frowned, puzzled by Inchrist's line of questioning. "I'm only asking you to swing your sword. Is it really that hard?" Ragnar wanted to add. "I'm not trying to insult you, I'm just curious." Inchrist didn't care about Ragnar's questioning. He stood up straight and asked bluntly, "Where is the optimal center of gravity for the body?" Ragnar was momentarily surprised by his deep-seated inquiry. The center of gravity." He immediately struck a random pose. "Like this? If I'm not mistaken, I guess so." From that question alone, Inchrist understood everything. He thought to himself, "I knew it. How could a genius like him understand how his own body works?" Inchrist mused that while Ragnar's explanations were difficult, he knew he had a unique advantage. One of his special abilities was intense focus. His eyes flashed with contemplation no matter what. He had to master this. Stance and movement techniques while swinging the sword. The loop brought him back to the fog-filled battlefield arrows, raining down his heart racing. Inchrist tried to turn and deflect the arrows. The sound of metal clashing rang out again, piercing and harsh, but he realized his body was still too stiff. From afar, an arrow. He flew straight toward where Inchrist was standing. Instead of fear, he welcomed it as an opportunity. "It's okay. I'll die and learn again." Sure enough, that arrow sent him to meet his ancestors once more. Time dragged on mercilessly through death and rebirth. Images of Ragnar kept surfacing, sweat-drenched training sessions, tears repeating over and over, seemingly without end. By today, the 13th day after countless rounds of training, Inchrist noticed a clear change in himself. His body was becoming more supple. Ragnar witnessed his sword stroke just now and spoke up, offering unexpected praise. "That move just now wasn't bad. Since when did you learn that?" He sheathed his sword, nodding in recognition. "Now you can finally start learning the basics of swordsmanship." Ragnar began to diligently guide him through the core concepts, basic attacks, including slashes and thrusts. Ragnar held his sword up to block a strike and continued, "To defend, use the body of the blade. If you have a good enough sword, you can use the edge." No sooner had he finished speaking than Ragnar swung his blade into the empty space between them, the sharp tip pointing straight at Inchrist's throat. But he left a tiny bit of distance so as not to hurt him. "The closest distance between you and your opponent is called the sword path." Ragnar maintained his stance and said slowly, "Limit the opponent's swing range while increasing your own reach. That's swordsmanship. Imagine your opponent in your head, then swing." Back in the foggy battle, Inchrist nimbly sidestepped a spear thrust with precision. His feet felt light, escaping that strike with ease. He was satisfied with himself after the painful loops, but fate didn't let Inchrist enjoy it for long. From out of nowhere, a barrage of arrows came flying at him, aiming straight at his body as he danced with precise sword movements. Inchrist realized something unusual. He thought today is gradually changing, returning to the old days. Ragnar easily blocked a sudden strike from him with his sword. Christ looked at Ragnar's sword skill in awe. His eyes widened and he silently marveled. "Huh, you just blocked that. By just observing my sword path." Christ felt the flow of the battle. Though still fuzzy, he didn't wait for his thoughts to overflow. Christ swung his sword down, creating a perfect arc. Ragnar smiled slightly, commending him. That cross slash just now, not bad at all. However, Ragnar didn't know that Christ could regenerate time and time again, and each compliment was paid for with his own life. Continuing from his previous hesitation, Christ thought, but those small improvements gradually accumulated with each death. The image on the battlefield where his comrades were still screaming in horror. "Squad leader, are you crazy?" flashed clearly in his mind again. The battlefield became the place where Christ felt countless arrows flying at him once more, until the sacrifices were no longer in vain. Christ rejoiced at his new progress. "I can see the progression. It's another loop." Ragnar decisively swung down from above his sword, aimed at his target with pinpoint accuracy. However, Christ was no longer clumsy. He crouched easily, dodging the strike. Christ confidently swung his blade to counter Ragnar's attack. The two swords clashed, the force so strong that both were thrown backward, showing the progress Christ had made. Time drifted by in the endless loop. Today was the 100th day. Standing before Ragnar, Christ's aura had completely transformed, leaving Ragnar incredibly surprised. At first he was silent, after noticing the change in Christ. His eyes widened. Finally, Ragnar had to blurt out, "You?" Ragnar hesitated when he saw Christ's eyes. "Who are you?" he asked. Ragnar's gaze had completely changed. It was no longer the look one gives a clumsy fool, but that of a true warrior. Back on the battlefield, for who knows how many times Christ stood tall, proud, feeling a talent he never thought he could develop. Right behind him, Ragnar's voice rang out again. "Squad leader, wait up." Christ stepped firmly forward. He lunged forward, leaving all doubt behind. He had climbed to the next level. Arrows flew like stray bullets, aiming for Christ. One was right next to his face. Christ nimbly dodged, his feet steady as he rushed ahead. As you head toward your destination, you know the steep price one must pay to walk the path of a knight. Suddenly, an enemy appears right in front of you. Spear in hand, he'd been lying in ambush. Inquisitor finds himself back in the fray. But the enemy doesn't know that he has logged back into this battle once more. All that glory lies on the other side of this agony. The thrill and the burning desire to push past his limits set Inquisitor's chest ablaze. This battle is so fun, it's driving him insane. The loop begins again. Ragnar tilts his head, asking, "Captain, do you want to learn how to swing a sword?" To gain ultimate power in return if he can become stronger, Inquisitor grips the hilt tightly and replies, "Of course." Inquisitor is willing to die and be reborn 100,000 times to achieve what he wants. Ragnar watches him, resting his sword on his shoulder, his eyes filled with surprise as he looks at the young commander before him. "I didn't expect the captain to be this good." He steps closer, lowers his blade into the ground, and leans on the hilt, narrowing his eyes as he asks, "Have you been faking your incompetence all this time?" Before Inquisitor can even speak, Ragnar laughs. The basics are enough for now. Ragnar offers nothing more, only saying, "It seems the captain needs more real-world combat." From within the white fog, a hail of arrows flies toward Inquisitor's troop. Tightening his grip on the hilt, his gaze steely, he has repeated this day over 200 times. Inquisitor's footing is solid, serving as the pillar for his body as he prepares the perfect defensive stance. He easily deflects the incoming arrows, but immediately from behind an enemy spear strikes. Inquisitor ducks, dodging the sharp point meant to finish him off. A spark flashes in Inquisitor's eyes. He tells himself with determination, "Let's see how far the strength I've honed can truly go." Facing the foggy front line, the enemy lunges again, but the trajectory of his spear is easily anticipated. The enemy is stunned, but before he can even wonder why, Inquisitor finishes him off. With a swift strike, he sends that soldier straight to hell. Inquisitor is hyper-focused and calculating. I remember exactly where and when the enemies appear in this mist. He presses his advantage, continuously taking down foes despite the poor visibility. Inquisitor slashes his sword, slicing through the air in the hazy void. He is proud. "I can still take down a few." Behind the fog, a series of thuds echo as they fall. A soldier panics and screams before collapsing. His comrades around him start to stir, looking around frantically. One is bewildered, asking, "Who? What is it? There's no one here." Inquisitor moves like a ghost. He suddenly appears before a shell-shocked soldier and slashes at his legs, wounding him. Chaos quickly spreads through the enemy formation. What's happening? What is right in front of us? A guard notices something strange on the ground and shouts a warning. "Watch the ground. Careful of the ground." The archers are so terrified they lose their will to fight. Inquisitor moves flexibly between the sword swings, reminding himself of the hard-learned lesson Ragnar gave him. Remember well, eyes, feet, hands. Inquisitor focuses intensely, applying everything he's been taught, observing and predicting with his eyes. He nimbly steps forward, shifting his weight with his feet, and decisively swings his sword in a perfect sharp arc, taking out another soldier. "And finish with your hands," he tells himself. Inquisitor flashes an excited smile, his eyes burning with insane joy as he clearly feels a new surge of strength coursing through him. He looks at the enemies falling at his feet and feels proud. Compared to when he hadn't honed these basic skills, the feeling is completely different. A warrior's thrill surges within him. He points his sword forward, provocatively. "More." He steps through the fog without hesitation, heading straight for the heart of the enemy lines. "Come get some." The harder he fights, the more intense he becomes, sending each soldier packing. When he stands amidst the enemy encirclement, Inquisitor readies his stance, eager to charge. An enemy commander shouts angrily, seeing his ranks disrupted. How did you infiltrate this place? But with so few men, do you really think you can survive and make it back?" Inquisitor ignores the threat. As if fueled by a new surge of power, he continues to sweep through with his sword. "That's not enough," he bellows. His voice echoes across the misty battlefield. "Fight me with your swordplay." His eyes burn with a heroic desire to transcend his own limits. "Come on. I want to challenge myself even more." Inquisitor's reckless actions terrify the opposing soldiers, who curse, "That bastard is insane." They hold their crossbows, ignoring the danger, and fire a volley of arrows to destroy him. In the depths of his thoughts, droplets of water patter down. The cursing still lingers somewhere. "You fool. You're walking into your own death." A phantasmagorical face appears in Inquisitor's illusion. The Grim Reaper watches Inquisitor's reckless demeanor and roars, "Going crazy again, are you?" In another loop at the encampment, Inquisitor lies on a wooden cot. The scene is incredibly familiar. He sits up, still dazed. "What is this? It's been so long since we met. Are you only here to curse at me? What did I come here, Atisha, to do?" As he's lost in thought, James approaches from afar. Seeing Inquisitor awake, he walks over. "What are you doing sitting there in a daze?" Inquisitor starts and turns around, sighing. Seeing that familiar cheeky face, he silently blames that guy James. Memories bring Inquisitor back to the foggy battlefield. James sees the thick smoke obscuring his vision and curses angrily. Is this a spell? Which bastard did this? Inquisitor is calm by his side. He is far too used to this line. Suddenly a doubt arises in his heart every time the fog appears. You also yell that it's a spell. He recalls the tactical map in his head and analyzes the enemy formation. There's no clever tactic to it, just like in the tall grass field. They are protecting that flag. Inquisitor is full of questions in his mind. Why? Suddenly he asks, James, do you know anything about magic spells? James is taken aback by Inquisitor's question. Magic spells. Why are you asking about that all of a sudden? Inquisitor replies frankly, to find the answer. I'm just curious. If you know it, spit it out, James said, crossing his arms and slowly explaining what he knew. Do you even know the difference between magic and sorcery? Inquis speculated a little before answering. Magic is more common. And James nodded in agreement, but added, that's not even the core of it. Wrong, he said, his voice grave, emphasizing the importance of the key element. Sorcery requires a medium, doesn't it? It's not just a matter of need, it's absolutely vital, James affirmed, his gaze serious. Without a medium, sorcery is useless. Inquis fell deep into thought. James's words were like opening a new door, a medium, so that was it. Inquis began to understand. Inquis connected the facts and drew his own conclusion. This fog is created by the enemy's sorcery, and that flag is the medium. In other words, if they destroyed the flag, the fog would vanish. Turning to look at Ren, who was standing nearby, Inquis asked curiously, "Does your tribe use this stuff too?" He recalled rumors that sorcery originated in the West, and James had come from the Western wildlands. James laughed and began to recount what he had witnessed. "I've seen it before, you know. True mages are rare. Most of the wanderers on this continent are just hacks and frauds." Inquis didn't respond and walked straight out of the tent. Seeing Inquis suddenly turn and leave, James called out loudly, "Where are you going?" Inquis didn't look back. He simply replied, "Training." By the time he reached the training ground, Ragnar was waiting to provide him with some useful information. Fortunately, it was something. "The squad leader and I share the same origin," Ragnar said, getting straight to the point. He asked Inquis, "Do you know about the 5 great sword arts?" Ragnar slowly began to recount an old legend. According to his knowledge, 500 years ago, a genius was born. Born into a poor farming family at 9 years old. The boy used a hoe to kill all 12 bandits that attacked his farm. He continued in a low voice, recounting the thrilling life of that figure. Orphaned at an early age and forced to be independent, the boy grasped the principles of swordsmanship. Later, a noble heard of his reputation, tracked him down, and adopted him. Ragnar looked up at the sky and recited the name with great reverence. That genius was known as Leonidas von der Hack. The image of a talented young genius filled his mind. He sighed softly, his tone filled with regret for a tragic fate. However, Leonidas was both heaven-gifted and cursed. Ragnar lowered his voice as if empathizing with the man. From the age of 7, his limbs began to weaken, and before he turned 12, he suffered from a terminal illness that left him paralyzed. The unfortunate genius seemed destined to be forgotten. Finally, he calmly reached the great turning point. However, at age 20, even while completely paralyzed, Leonidas created a new chapter for the continent's swordsmanship. He systematized all existing schools of swordsmanship into 5 types. They are, Ragnar listed them, one by one: precision and refined swordsmanship, powerful and fierce swordsmanship, graceful and flexible swordsmanship, lightning-fast swordsmanship, and unpredictable swordsmanship. Inquis listened intently to Ragnar's story. His face showed clear admiration as he silently repeated the peak sword arts mentioned. "The 5 great sword arts." Inquis's mind echoed with Ragnar's words. Leonidas had rewritten the history of swordsmanship, and the Arniac family had become the most powerful in the empire thanks to this. This school of swordsmanship had been passed down through generations and became the standard. Ragnar continued to explain the geographical division of the schools today. Today we have the northern heavy sword, the central precision and flowing sword, the western rapier, and the southern Huan sword. Besides that, there is the eastern strange sword. To use the northern heavy sword, I developed a technique myself. Inquis tried to remember the name Ragnar had mentioned. It seems like beast's conscience, no beast's heart. Ragnar smirked and corrected him. Either way, this technique is more useful than that. Ragnar's aura shifted completely. It became incredibly sharp. He said to Inquis seriously, "Focus absolutely. Forget everything around you and focus only on the opponent and your own blade." With that, Ragnar took a stance, sword ready. Suddenly, he stopped and said to Inquis, "Let me be clearer." Inquis was caught off guard, fumbling as he tried to explain with words. The thing was, suddenly a sword strike tore through the wind toward Inquis. The strike wasn't a threat. It didn't hesitate to leave a scratch on his neck. Inquis was incredibly surprised. He silently assessed a strike faster than James's axe. "I almost died." Ragnar showed no regret, only asking, "Inquis, didn't you feel anything?" Just then, Zem stepped forward, having witnessed the easily misunderstood situation. Gritting his teeth, he barked, "You jerk!" Zem shouldered his axe, his voice growling with rage. "Do you want to kill the squad leader?" Ragnar calmly ignored his words, and the big guy Zem outside his field of vision. He calmly explained the reason. "When facing death, focus increases. I was just helping him train." Hearing that Zem was like a bull being poked, exploding. "You have to be alive to use sword techniques." The squad leader had to spend a very, very long time learning the beast's heart. Inquis stayed silent, watching them bicker. Ragnar didn't hold back at all, bluntly saying, "It's because he was raised by that ignorant barbarian." James, hearing himself being insulted, angrily threatened, "Do you want a taste of my axe that badly?" Their voices echoed across the training ground. Inquis remained silent, not intending to intervene, silently assessing both of them. "You both explain things just as vaguely as the other." Zem couldn't find a retort, then suddenly remembered. He spoke up, twisting his words provokingly. "Hey you're from the far north, right? That place is full of pure barbarians, isn't it?" Ragnar immediately fired back without a hint of restraint. "And you're from a barbarian tribe in the west." Zem still didn't stop the argument. "I can make it work with Drachna. Just carve onto my tombstone, 'Here lies a man who died at the hands of the Manji.'" Inquis sighed, exasperated by the two idiots bickering, then stepped forward to cut through the pointless argument and urge them on. "Let's go. Zem, are you here because of the summon?" Watching his student's back, Ragnar warned him before the battle began. Feel that extreme nervous tension when facing death. Ragnar knew this was the key to unlocking a new realm. When absolute focus kicks in, everything around you will fade away, and you'll feel the sword move exactly as you intend. Inquis pondered the difference between the two combat styles. Images of the enemy army flashed through his mind again, similar to the beast heart, yet entirely different. He clearly defined his own path of cultivation. The beast heart is about courage in the face of death, while absolute focus requires intense, singular concentration. I need more real combat experience to grasp this feeling. The time to march was drawing near. As he returned to the fog-covered battlefield, his goal was clear. He told himself, and the flag was the catalyst for the spell creating the fog. In his eyes, that flag was the primary target. He hardened his resolve. At any cost, I must destroy it, to stop the enemy's one-sided assault. The moment the battle began, the soldiers around him panicked as the white smoke rolled in. "What is this? Fog." Inquis swung his sword to clear a path, setting a prerequisite task for himself, one more goal for this battle. He charged forward without hesitation, clear in his mind. First, destroy that flag. Inquis was no longer as reckless as he had been in his previous life. He was much more composed, carefully clearing the path. Inquis silently calculated, if I brought Zem or Ragnar, I could easily reach that flag. As he thought, he kept his sword moving. Destroying the enemy formation, scores of soldiers fell by his hand before they could even utter a dying breath. Inquis was like a machine. With every swing, an enemy went down. Deep down, Inquis remained incredibly stubborn. He decided to reach the flag in his own way, whispering to himself, "But I want to try this on my own." Inquis. Alone, he dove into the dense fog. He realized the difficulty of this new realm. Absolute focus is not easy at all. I've died and come back so many times, yet I still haven't grasped even a sliver of it. Inquis recalled the moment he took down the assassin. The cold sensation of hot blood spraying out, combined with the sound of the assassin collapsing, was proof of the brutal survival he endured. I have to become stronger, so I'm not the one falling. Honing his senses to survive the assassin's blade, every scar on his body was a costly lesson on the battlefield. Inquis hurriedly dodged a soldier's strike. The beast heart had been tempered by being stabbed, slashed, and dragged through the battlefield. He questioned himself while trying to find that miraculous feeling, that absolute focus. In the training space, Ragnar swung his sword toward him and asked, "Can you feel it?" He slowly described the state of this advanced realm. They say when you succeed, you'll see the opponent's sword move in slow motion. You have to be able to feel that. Inquis shook his head helplessly and replied, "I don't know if the courage brought by the beast heart is holding me back." Ragnar pulled back his sword and nodded in agreement. "It seems so. Everything around you blurs, leaving only the opponent's sword. Can't you predict the strike?" "You don't feel anything." Inquis frowned. He felt something was wrong with this method. Using fear of death to focus. That doesn't seem right. Then he asked Ragnar, "So how did you learn absolute focus?" Ragnar blanked for a moment at such an obvious question. "Huh? Learn what I just do it naturally." Hearing this, Inquis was speechless. He asked back doubtingly, "Naturally?" Ragnar nodded, looking as nonchalant as if it were the easiest thing in the world. "Yeah, that's right. Just focus on one point and you'll do it." Inquis sighed, exasperated by the genius's teaching style. Expecting a clear explanation from Rachna was a mistake. It seems I have to experience and learn it on my own. He steeled his nerves temporarily, setting aside his training to focus on the big picture. Don't be impatient, he told himself. I will continue practicing absolute focus later. For now, I must destroy that flag. He crouched low, using the terrain to ambush, weaving through the enemy ranks to minimize casualties, for his allies as much as possible. Around him, his own soldiers were still in chaos, screaming in the thick smoke. What is this? I can't see anything. Inquis charged ahead. He shouted orders to the soldiers nearby. Everyone get down. All the soldiers, hearing the command from their captain, reflexively obeyed. He raised his shield high, huge to block the volley of arrows raining down. Shield wall, he roared. Thanks to memories of hundreds of past failures, he was confident in controlling the situation. Immediately, a rain of arrows struck right toward the unit. Thanks to his old memories, Inquis successfully kept his troops safe. He thought to himself, I've repeated this process over 300 times. Even with my eyes closed, I could know when they would attack. After the arrow storm passed, Inquis tossed the shield aside. He dashed forward like a bolt of lightning into the fog. His sudden appearance panicked the enemy. An enemy soldier yelled, "What, where?" Inquis was like a flash, appearing and disappearing everywhere, quickly taking down a large number of enemy soldiers. His sword strokes were so fast and precise that with every swing, someone fell. A spearman looked on in horror at the lone figure, sweeping through his ranks. "That crazy bastard!" The man next to him exclaimed in shock. "There's only one. Is it just one guy?" He hurriedly pointed at Inquis and roared an order. "Quick, capture him!" The soldiers rushed forward like a storm, intending to surround Inquis alone. However, thanks to those grueling training sessions, that group of soldiers was no longer a concern for Inquis. He swung his sword, sending them all away, not leaving a single one. Every sword stroke took another life. Seeing their numbers dwindling, the commander shouted in anger, "You useless idiots! What are you standing around for? Quick, stop him!" Inquis was getting more and more heated. He swung his sword, cutting down those who stood in his way. The clanging of weapons hitting each other was deafening. The soldiers fell one by one under Inquis's blade. He continued to advance smoothly toward the flag. Inquis counted his steps. "I've gone through this 10 times just to reach this point." You charged straight toward the ultimate target with eyes blazing. Finally, within reach of the flag, a loud tearing sound echoed as you swung your sword and slashed the battle flag in two. But the fog showed no signs of clearing. Clearly, I destroyed the flag. So why is the fog still here? From deep within the smoke, the enemy stepped out with a mocking, triumphant smile. "It seems you know a thing or two about magic spells, huh? You've been fooled." He swung his sword quickly, sending Increase to meet his ancestors for the umpteenth time. Increase gritted his teeth, realizing the opponent's cunning trick. "I see. Only one flag is real. The other 5 are fakes." The guy pulled his sword out of Increase, leaving him to collapse. But one thing remained pinned in his mind. I must find the real flag among them. In another loop, Ragnar saw him preparing to charge into the mist again, and called out loudly, "Squad leader!" He shouted, full of concern. "Where are you going all by yourself?" Increase seemed not to hear him. Once again, he dashed into the night, leaving his soldiers behind. Increase silently calculated the win probability in his head. The odds are 1 in 5 for the remaining flags. Back on the battlefield, he continued to roar commands to the soldiers to dodge attacks, then knelt down with his shield. The cries of the coalition soldiers rang out incessantly. "What is that guy doing? I can't see anything, damn it, what is going on?" Increase braced himself for the hail of arrows from the enemy, but was suddenly struck in the shoulder by a spear. He winced in pain. Suddenly, all around him, comrades who couldn't adapt were falling down. That was when he realized the pace of the battle had changed. "After this, I won't be able to keep up anymore. Is it because of the time? I need to give them time to observe and catch their breath." The battle dragged on through many rebirths, so Increase refused to give up. "It took me 3 tries today to reach the second flag." He slashed through the next flag, but the result was still 0. Another fake. 4 flags left. The loop continued. Increase never gave up. He continued to storm the 3rd flag. It took me 5 tries today to get here. Looking at the fallen flag while the fog remained thick, he grew angry. Another trap. Fatigue and pain accumulated through each loop and the 4th flag. It took me 7 tries today, and he sacrificed himself again, with every failure. That is the price to pay. He dropped to his knees panting, looking at the unchanged result. Still the same. A soldier approached, raised his spear, and finished Increase off. Time looped again. Increase's will was now somewhat eroded. He forced himself to move, his eyes locked, on the deepest part of the enemy camp. Now only 2 flags remained. If he had to guess which one was real, Increase made a final decision to bet it all. He cast his vision far away. Searching for his target, the last flag fluttering in the wind came into Increase's sights. He speculated that the flag with the highest probability was the one in the innermost position. The mist suddenly rolled in again. The clamor of soldiers rose up everywhere. "What is this? I can't, see anything." Increase was the only one not afraid. He shouted the order, "Kneel." Once he had assessed the situation, Increase continued to shout, "Shields up." Immediately, another barrage of arrows tore through the wind. They rushed toward the sturdy fence. Knowing that human strength has its limits, Increase decided to change tactics. He turned to call his reliable comrade Gem, who was struggling with the fog. That damn magic spell! Suddenly Increase flew over and grabbed Gem's arm. "Gem, follow me." Gem carried his axe and ran alongside him. Seeing the long, enemy-dense path ahead, he asked, "What are you planning to do, Increase?" Worriedly looking at the row upon row of enemy defenses, "It's still so far away. We'll be exhausted before we even reach the real flag." Both Increase and Gem stood side by side, beginning to sweep across the battlefield. A soldier saw them both, easily dodging their dark magic, and grew furious. "You bastards!" Increase signaled with his eyes, mapping out a coordinated plan for Gem to distract them. "And I will take that opportunity to infiltrate." Increase bolted straight ahead. Gem stayed behind to hold off the squad of soldiers. He grabbed one and demanded, full of murderous intent, Which one of you cast this spell?" Seeing the soldier trembling in silence, he decisively swung his sword to finish him off and coldly walked on. "Not talking. Then I'll ask the next one." And so it went. Gem had replaced the clearing machine that Increase was creating a solid anchor for him to find the guiding flag. Increase thought back on the arduous journey he had been through. 500 times today have passed, and I still haven't escaped death in this mist. He kept charging forward under Gem's cover. Increase stood before the final flag eyes, blazing with the fire of the finish line. But this mist, he raised his longsword high, pouring all his strength into a powerful slash. "It ends here." But before the flag could be cut, a sword blade appeared from nowhere to block Increase's strike. It was Mitt who had stopped him. Seeing the enemy standing before him, he was overjoyed. "The gods have answered my prayers." He stared at Increase with eyes crazed by hatred. "I will personally kill you." Increase calmly looked his opponent straight in the face. He coldly let out a casual question. "Who are you?" Hearing the question, Mitt was dumbfounded in the middle of the battlefield. He couldn't believe this guy didn't recognize him. "You," he stammered, gritting his teeth in fury, looking at Increase. "It's only been a few days and you've already forgotten me." Increase looked at the strange man before him. He had no memory, yet was being interrogated upon first meeting. Increase gripped his sword, looked up at Mitt. "So, you are—" The man's face was full of arrogance. "Stung by that, huh?" Suddenly Mitt grabbed his sword and lunged straight at him, closing the distance at lightning speed. "You'll remember." Increase widened his eyes, revealing fury at his sudden attack. He quickly leaned his body to dodge the lethal strike. Increase stomped hard on the ground. To gain momentum, lunged forward to close in on his opponent. He poured all his remaining strength into a high leap to counterattack, creating an overwhelming stance. Mitt panicked and dodged when he saw the sharp blade rushing toward him. "What the hell is this?" He saw Increase, focused intently staring at every single movement, thinking to himself, "Is this the same guy as before? His strength has increased significantly." Mitt gritted his teeth, his face twisted in pure rage. Does he really think he can take him on with just a single move? Increase lunged at him again, wild and reckless, his sharp blade ready to strike down right in front of his opponent, while Mitt held his own sword up, preparing to counter. Their blades clashed head-on, triggering a violent shockwave accompanied by a spray of sparks and the ear-piercing screech of metal against metal. Increase's eyes flared. He was using sword techniques focused on fundamentals, but he could see Mitt bracing for the counter, expertly weaving in dueling sword techniques as well. Specializing in defense, the guy kept slashing his blade toward Increase, who took advantage of the slight opening to deliver a strike that forced Mitt to step back and create some safe distance. Increase was sharp and composed, every ounce of his focus locked on the man in front of him. Mitt's eyes turned cold, radiating murderous intent as he raised his sword to prepare for a finishing blow. Increase saw him do it and steeled himself. He knew that even a momentary lapse in focus would break his balance. He centered his mind, then suddenly unleashed a wide, sweeping arc. It was a brutal strike meant to end it right there. He poured everything he had into it. Increase remembered the image of the guy gritting his teeth, using terrifying force to push back against his blade. Forget the flag. He widened his eyes, pure determination, written all over his face. He wanted to end this tense battle as quickly as possible. Victory or defeat in this sword fight. Increase swung his sword, feeling as if time itself had frozen. When faced with the overwhelming killing intent enveloping them both, everything else faded away. Sharp white flashes from their blades sliced through the air. They created a powerful vortex of energy. Only the swords remained. The guy's eyes widened, full of malice, as he swung his weapon with terrifying strength to defend himself. Mitt stomped his foot hard and lunged forward. Dao, at blinding speed. Their swords collided, shattering the limit. Increase's blade was knocked back, and his eyes suddenly widened in shock at the erratic, lightning-fast trajectory of the guy's strikes. Suddenly, the sharp blade tore through his protective armor, piercing Increase's shoulder, creating a truly cruel and blood-soaked scene. He gritted his teeth, enduring the agony, as fresh blood began to pour out. Increase collapsed to the ground, coughing up blood, helpless against such overwhelming strength. He gasped for air, exhausted, his sharp, cold gaze fixed on the guy. He whispered, "I remember you now." Hearing that, Mitt's expression grew complex, and he asked, "What? You're the one who stood in front of the flag at the meadow, aren't you?" Upon hearing this, the man proudly introduced himself, Mitt Harrison, captain of the Aspen Duchy's Hound Squad. Blood dripped from his mouth as Increase swallowed his pain, bowing his head to respond, squad leader of the Norillia Kingdom. Hearing that, a soldier behind them exclaimed, "An enemy soldier." The guy replied, "Seems so. He's quite good at hiding, isn't he?" Mitt stood tall, looking down at Increase, who was kneeling below, as he heard the soldier continue. "Seems a bit disappointing, doesn't it?" "Squad leader." The guy suddenly panicked. "What are you saying? Why are you laughing?" With sweat dripping down his face and enduring the agony of the wound, he smiled faintly. Increase's eyes narrowed, thinking to himself, "Ragnar, this guy is insane. He's not struggling out of fear of death." He looked at Mitt's judging face. This was an enemy, worthy of his respect. A rival who could make him go all out and sharpen himself in every moment of life and death. The guy still gripped his sword, looking down at Increase from above. So he was truly insane. Mitt decisively yanked his sword out of Increase's chest, and blood sprayed out along with the blade.